Hey guys, tonight we're diving deep, like mammoth hide deep, into how cavemen survived some of the coldest, most brutal winters this planet has ever dished out. You're about to travel back tens of thousands of years to a time before electric blankets, Gore-Tex, or even socks. Just you, the ice, and your stubborn refusal to die. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. But that's okay, because in this version, you're going to feel what it's like, and then safely drift off in your cozy modern bed afterward. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments, what city are you in and what time is it right now? I'm in your ears around midnight, but you do you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You don't know what cold really is until you've stood barefoot on frost-covered dirt, staring out at a sunless sky while your breath curls into the air like ghost smoke. Welcome to Ice Age Europe, somewhere around 30,000 years ago. You're standing outside a rocky overhang with your tribe, hands raw and calloused, wrapped in a thick pelt that still smells faintly of wet muskox. Your stomach is full. Well, not full, but it's got something in it. Probably roasted roots and a bit of hair from last night. More importantly though, your fire is still burning. Fire. You treat it like it's alive. It crackles in its shallow pit, flickering like a nervous heartbeat. You remember the first time your people learned to make it. Not just use it when lightning hit a tree, but actually make it. Rubbing sticks or striking flint against pyrite until that fragile golden spark took root in dry grass. A few inches of ember that you fed like a baby, coaxing it into flame. That changed everything. Without it, you're just meat in a frozen landscape. You squat beside the fire, palms out, soaking in the radiant warmth that pushes just far enough to take the sting out of the air. Beyond the firelight, frost glitters like tiny knives across the earth. You understand something your distant ancestors didn't. That fire isn't just heat, it's safety. Predators don't like it. Spirits, maybe even the cold itself, seems to retreat from it. You've learned to keep it alive. Always. If you move camp, someone carries an ember in a stone bowl or wrapped in bark. If the fire dies, someone is always ready to bring it back to life. You keep your fire low and fed with dry wood. Too much smoke and you'll choke inside the cave. Too little, and frost will bite your toes off before morning. You figured out the balance. You even arranged stones around the fire to hold the heat, turning the circle of your shelter into a pocket of breathable warmth. Occasionally you toss herbs or sap into the flames, not just for smell but for ceremony. Fire is a god, and you feed it like one. Now and then, you look over your shoulder to where the younger ones huddle, curled under shared pelts. Their cheeks are red from wind and their lips chapped, but they're breathing slow and steady. One of them snores softly. You smile, just slightly. They're warm because of fire. The cave behind you is deep and dark, but the floor closest to the opening has been cleared and flattened. You laid down branches and dried grasses, and over those layered animal skins. Not plush or luxurious, but better than bare rock. If you're lucky, the ground doesn't sap the heat out of your body before sunrise. A good fire can mean the difference between waking up stiff or not waking up at all. Across the fire, your companion pokes the coals with a stick, checking to make sure they're alive beneath the ash. You exchange a glance. No words, you rarely need them. The fire talks for you. Its light plays across your faces, casting long, war-painted shadows on the walls. Sometimes you dream by this fire. Sometimes you see the ancestors in the flames. In colder months, you become more vigilant, especially when the wind starts to scream through the mountain passes. The fire is fed more frequently, its glow a symbol of dominance over nature itself. But you've seen what happens when it's lost. There was a time, a few winters ago, when your neighbour clan couldn't keep theirs going. A storm, a miscalculation, some bad luck. Half of them didn't make it. You did, because your fire never went out. Quirky fact. Sometimes, when the wind is too wild to risk sparking a flame, you and your tribe have used fungus, tinder fungus, found on birch trees, to store embers for hours. You cradle the smouldering mass like treasure, travelling miles to reignite your central flame from it, a little charred lump that hums with the power of survival. But let's be honest, scientists still debate exactly when and how early humans started controlling fire regularly. Some evidence points to hearths dating back 400,000 years in Europe. Others argue it might have been closer to 1 million years in Africa. It's tricky because fire doesn't fossilise. The best clues are charcoal layers in sediment, heat-damaged stones, or burned bones buried deep in old cave floors. Even today you wonder if it was a lucky accident or a spark of genius that gave your people this edge. Regardless, tonight your hands are warm. The wind can howl all it wants. You sit back against the rock wall, pull your fur tighter, and let the fire talk you to sleep. Your fire crackles low, steady and comforting, but you've come to learn that a flame in the open is vulnerable. Wind, rain, snow. Any of these could snuff it out in a blink. That's why, when you finally figured out how to build a hearth, a true hearth, you changed the game. This isn't just about keeping the flame alive anymore. It's about controlling it, taming it, and turning it into a true tool of survival. Tonight, as snow begins to fall outside in silent, heavy flakes, you squat beside the heart of your shelter. A shallow pit, carved carefully into the cave floor and ringed with stones, blackened from hundreds of fires before. This is your hearth. It didn't always look this neat. At first, you simply burned fires on dirt, letting the warmth rise and the ash blow wherever it liked. But then you noticed something. A ring of rocks helped contain the fire, held in the heat longer, and made it easier to manage. So little by little you built something better. Not a fireplace like in your cosy 21st century cabin, but the earliest version of one, and it does the trick. The cave itself helps. You didn't pick this spot at random. No one does. You learn fast in the wild. A good cave faces away from the wind and gets sun during the day. A bad one floods, or worse, draws in icy air that clings to the floor like a ghost. Yours is just right. The ceiling slopes upward, which helps the smoke rise and drift out without choking everyone. You've even dug a tiny channel, more like a trench, toward the back wall so pooled water from melted snow doesn't creep under your bedding. The hearth itself is simple but smart. Stones circle the edge, absorbing heat and radiating it long after the flames die down. At night, when the fire is reduced to glowing coals, you can pile a few more stones on top. Come morning, they're still warm, and your fingers aren't frozen stiff when you wake. It's these little tricks, learned slowly over time, that make a world of difference. Your people didn't invent survival overnight. They earned it, one frostbitten toe at a time. Tonight someone in your group is adding wood to the fire. Not just any wood. Dry, seasoned and chosen for slow burn. Wet wood hisses and smokes too much. Green wood is even worse, clogging up the air with fumes that sting your eyes and settle heavy on your lungs. But that seasoned oak you found last summer and stored under a rocky ledge, that's the good stuff. It burns slow and hot, perfect for keeping the hearth alive through the long, bitter night. Your feet are tucked beneath you on a mammoth hide mat, and even though the air is cold, the space near the fire feels like a tiny bubble of summer. You look around and notice others have drifted off. Soft breathing, the occasional shift or snore, even the gentle hum of someone dreaming. The hearth doesn't just warm your body, it brings you together. You gather here to eat, to talk, to sit in silence. This is the pulse of the home. Now, something interesting you've noticed. The way ash piles up in the hearth helps insulate embers. You learned, maybe by accident, that a layer of ash keeps the fire alive longer. Bury a coal in it, and it smoulders quietly, sometimes for a full day. You've used that trick many times. In the morning you brush back the powder, expose the glowing core, add kindling, and just like that, the flame is reborn. No flint, no struggle. Just patience and know-how. This little innovation is actually backed by archaeology. Some of the oldest hearths discovered show layers of ash carefully managed over years. Evidence of intentional fire maintenance, not just wild blazes. These aren't just bonfires for cooking. They're the warm heartbeats of entire communities. A hearth is a sign of staying put, even if only for a season. It marks the difference between wandering and settling. Of course, not everyone agrees on when hearths first appeared. Some archaeologists argue that Neanderthals built them regularly, while others think early Homo sapiens perfected the concept. There's even debate about how much Neanderthals truly understood fire. Did they keep it alive, or did they let it go out and wait for lightning to bring it back? You'd like to believe they were smart enough to tend it like you do now, but history leaves gaps. Cold, smoky, ash-covered gaps. A quirky fact. Some hearths were found to be laced with crushed seashells or strange minerals. materials that wouldn't naturally be there. Maybe they were experimenting with fire colours, or maybe it was spiritual. Maybe someone long ago thought adding a bit of sparkle made the flame more powerful, or more protective. Who knows? Maybe that's why your cousin keeps tossing shiny beetle shells into the coals. Weird, but kind of pretty. Tonight, you rest your hand on a stone near the fire. It's smooth and warm, a simple pleasure. You know the rhythm of feeding the hearth. Every few hours someone must check it. If it dies, everyone suffers. But if it lives, even a cave in the dead of winter can feel like a home. The snow outside thickens, coating the entrance in white silence. You see your breath in the air but feel the heat on your face. Your eyelids droop. You can still hear the faint hiss and pop of sap in the firewood, the low murmur of life continuing. You're not just surviving the winter, you're mastering it. You wake up stiff, half buried beneath layers of animal hide, and the first thing you do, before even opening your eyes, is check for warmth. One hand reaches out toward the hearth, fingers fumbling through the cool morning air until they brush over a stone still clinging to the last ghost of heat. It's fading, sure, but it's enough. You made it through another night. The fire's low, but not dead. That ember you tucked under the ash is still glowing, pulsing like the last heartbeat of yesterday. You roll onto your side, stretch out the ache in your hips. Sleeping on fur over rock never gets comfortable exactly, and then pull your pelt tighter as you sit up. A fresh gust of air snakes through the cave's entrance, and you immediately regret it. It slices through the layers like a knife, and your teeth clench as you hug your knees and remember just how frozen the outside world really is. You look down at yourself. What you're wearing is more than just a covering. It's a suit of survival. You're bundled in layers of fur, reindeer over wolf over rabbit. The bottom layer is soft and tight to your skin, and the top layer is heavy, stiff, and absolutely vital. Fashion? Not really, but functional? Totally. That rabbit you caught 2 weeks ago? You ate the meat, of course, but it's the pelt that keeps your ankles from going numb every night. And tanning hides? Oof, that's a job. The process is tedious, smelly, and entirely necessary. You scrape, soak, stretch, and soften each skin using a cocktail of fat, urine, and elbow grease. Not romantic, but effective. A well-prepared hide can mean the difference between surviving a blizzard and becoming one with it. Some in your group even chew the edges of hides to soften them. It's gross, yeah, but your teeth are basically multi-tools. You don't have conditioner, but you've got technique. Once you learned how to keep the fur on the outside and the warmth on the inside, your life got exponentially better. These clothes aren't tailored in any fancy way. They're patched, stitched with bone needles, and often smell vaguely like whatever animal they used to be. But they trap heat like nothing else. You wrap leather thongs around your forearms and ankles to keep drafts from slipping in. Every gap is a vulnerability. Every fold matters. Today, as the sun finally peeks into the mouth of the cave, you catch sight of one of the younger kids hopping around in a poorly fastened fur tunic, shivering despite the pelt's thickness. Their belt's loose, and the cold is seeping in like a thief. You motion them over and adjust it, wrapping the hide tighter and securing it with a twist of sinew cord. They smile with chapped lips and run off, chasing whatever game they're playing, unaware that you just saved them a couple toes. Here's the quirky part. You've even started decorating your gear. Not for fun, really, though okay, maybe a little. But you've begun to mark your hides with lines of ochre, bits of bone, teeth, beads, even feathers. Some believe it wards off evil spirits. Some just want to look cool. Maybe it's both. In fact, when archaeologists uncovered some Ice Age burials, they found people buried with carefully decorated clothing and furs. Style, it seems, predates TikTok by tens of thousands of years. The way you choose your clothing depends a lot on your environment. In colder seasons, you go full layered. Inner fur facing your skin to trap body heat. Outer fur facing out to guard against wind and moisture. On slightly warmer days, you might trade heavy hides for thinner leathers, or strip down to just the underlayer while working. But most of the time, especially in the deep freeze of winter, you're swaddled like a roasted beetle larva. And here's something science still debates. Whether early humans adapted clothing out of pure necessity, or whether it had social and cultural roles too. Some argue clothing helped distinguish clans, or even indicated status. Others say nah, it was all about function. You, living in this moment, probably lean towards survival being the top priority, But when you look at the carved mammoth bone button your cousin wears, you start to wonder. Speaking of tools, let's talk needles, a game changer. Before those, you were tying things together or just draping hides over your shoulders like some half-frozen burrito. But once someone figured out how to poke a clean hole in a hide and thread sinew through it, that opened the door to real clothing. Things that fit, that moved with your body, that stayed put even when you were chasing down a panicked elk at full sprint. The needles are carved from bone, thin and strong, often polished until they shine. You keep yours in a little pouch along with your other essentials: stone flake, flint striker, dried fungus for fire starting, and a twist of smoked meat. You don't sew for fun, it's a constant cycle of maintenance. Cold splits leather, damp fur goes stiff and brittle, seams tear under stress. So you're always repairing, always adjusting. Every night around the hearth someone's working on something, patching a sleeve, adding fringe to a hem, maybe stitching a warmer boot liner. You even stuff dry moss into your shoes for insulation, swapping it out when it gets damp. Primitive? Sure, but it works. And boots, let's not overlook those. You wrap your feet in fur, soft side in, and bind it all with sinew strips. The outer sole, tough leather or thick hide, sometimes doubled up if you're travelling. Inside, a layer of dried grass or bark fibres helps wick moisture and insulate. Some days it's the only reason your toes are still attached. So here you are, fully dressed in hand-stitched survival-grade couture, leaning against a cave wall while sipping lukewarm broth from a carved horn. Outside, winter rages, wind curling like claws across the snow. But inside, you're dressed for the occasion, wrapped in layers of the world around you, hardened by the season, softened only by the fire's glow and the knowledge that yes, you might survive this night too. You used to think a cave was just a hole in a mountain, a place to duck into when the sky got dark or the wolves got too close. But now, you understand there's an art to cave selection. Not every cave is worthy of your precious fire or your hard-earned pelts. Some are too shallow, some echo in ways that make it impossible to sleep, some hold water like a stone sponge, and some, well, some already have other things living inside, and you learned quickly, if it smells like bear, it is bear. Move on. This season, you're in a good one. South-facing, high enough to avoid floods, low enough to cut the wind. The mouth is wide but not gaping, broad enough to let in morning light but tight enough to trap heat like a cup holds steam. As you step outside into the crunchy snow and take in the bleak grey of the midwinter sky, you glance back at the dark entrance behind you. To anyone else, it's just a rocky scar on the landscape. To you, it's warmth, shelter, home. You've stayed in worse. You remember that winter a few years back when the only shelter you found was a collapsed lava tube with a ceiling so low you had to crawl. You slept in shifts, shivering, because the fire couldn't breathe down there and neither could you. The smoke collected in pockets, and you woke up with your throat raw and your eyes burning. You lasted 3 days before giving up and walking 12 miles through a snowstorm to find somewhere better. That's when you realised the right cave isn't just protection, it's survival. Back then, you didn't think much about airflow. You thought, hey, any rock over my head is better than open sky. But now you know to test a cave before you commit. You light a bundle of moss, let it smoke, and watch the way it curls and dances. If it rises and finds a clean path out, you're golden. If it circles and chokes the air, you move on. Some caves breathe, inhale with the warm day, exhale with the cold night. You like those. They feel alive. The cave you're in now has layers, a sleeping area tucked to the back, dry and raised just slightly. A central space where the hearth lives, and a front area for butchering, scraping hides, or just waiting out a storm. It slopes just enough for melted snow to trickle toward the entrance, not your bedding. That's a detail you didn't think mattered until you woke up in a puddle of icy sludge. Once was enough. You step inside again, brushing snow off your shoulders. It melts quickly on the warm rock floor, leaving tiny puddles near the entrance. Someone's already up, tending to the fire, feeding it carefully so the smoke doesn't billow out and choke the place. You watch the way the flames flicker against the stone wall and remember another cave, one your elders still talk about. It had strange paintings, deep reds and ochres, animals drawn in motion like ghosts of hunts long past. The air there felt different, warmer somehow, like the walls remembered things. Quirky fact. Some caves were intentionally modified, scraped smooth, hollowed deeper, rocks stacked at the entrance to block wind. There's even evidence of people dragging mammoth bones to block openings and make semi-walls. One site had a door made of piled stone slabs that could be moved to seal the entrance at night. Think about that. A caveman door. Functional, heavy, and honestly, kind of brilliant. Of course, there's still debate among scholars about how much early humans truly altered their shelters. Some say most people were nomadic and didn't stay anywhere long enough to customize a cave. Others argue that seasonal return visits led to semi-permanent setups, especially if the location was good, access to water, game trails, and plenty of dry wood. Your experience says the second camp is probably right. You've returned to the same caves before, reusing what's worked. You leave markers, scratches in stone, piles of bones, even a certain arrangement of rocks, to say, "We were here. This place is safe." Today, you scan the interior again with practiced eyes. You check the bedding near the rear wall. Dry. Good. You test the draft with a licked finger. Gentle. Better. Then you listen. Really listen. No dripping, no howling from deep inside, that's key. Some caves are riddled with cracks and crevices that moan when the wind picks up, and you don't need that kind of stress at midnight. Last time that happened, one of the children had a full-blown panic fit, convinced the cave was haunted. You couldn't exactly argue. As the tribe stirs awake, you begin assigning tasks. Someone's out collecting kindling, someone else is sharpening bone blades. And you? You've got your eye on the walls. They're smooth here, especially on the north side. You've been thinking about marking them, not just for art but to pass something on. A reminder of this winter, of this cave, of the ones who stayed warm here when everything outside wanted them gone. Some in the group think the caves are sacred, that certain stones remember warmth and hold on to it. One elder says you shouldn't sleep near certain walls. She swears the cold seeps out of them like breath. You don't believe in magic rocks, but after that 1 week you slept near a wall that never warmed up, you've got to admit, maybe she's onto something. There's also the smell. You laugh a little to yourself about it now, but it matters. Some caves stink. Sulphur, bat dung, rotting leaves. You've learned to sniff before you settle. A clean-smelling cave is rare and precious. Yours smells like smoke, dried meat, and old leather. Not bad, all things considered. By midday you're sitting near the mouth of the cave, chewing a strip of smoked aurochs while sunlight filters in, warming the stones just slightly. You've packed snow into gaps in the rocks near the entrance to block drafts. It'll harden into a makeshift wall overnight. The inside feels cosy, a little smoky, a little damp, but safe. You're already thinking ahead. How long you can stay here, what resources are nearby, whether it's worth returning next year. And yeah, it's just a cave, but right now it's everything. Your shelter, your fireplace, your bedroom, your fortress, your entire world. You don't need a thatched roof or 4 walls. You've got stone and fire and a place out of the wind. That's what survival looks like in the Ice Age. It's not pretty, it's not clean, but it works. You don't exactly plan on being this close to other people all the time. It's just part of the deal. In this cave, privacy is a luxury no one's ever heard of. You wake up with someone's elbow in your ribs, a foot on your ankle, and a snoring nose pressed way too close to your ear. But you don't complain, because the truth is, in weather like this, every extra body's a little furnace, and you're not picky when it comes to warmth. Group heat isn't just practical, it's essential. You're not alone in this strategy either. Animals do it, birds huddle, wolves pile up, and you've adopted the same logic. On freezing nights, you sleep in clusters like a pile of worn-out laundry. Tangled, heavy, warm. The little ones are pressed in the middle, older members curled around the outside like a protective shell. You usually draw the short straw and end up near the edge, closest to the cold wall. But even then, you're better off than trying to brave it solo. You tried that once. Once was enough. Today, as the fire flickers low and a light snow drifts across the cave entrance, you're sandwiched between your brother and an elder who mumbles in his sleep. Your brother radiates heat like a bison. The elder, less so, but at least he doesn't kick. The kid on the far end is curled up around a puppy. Not quite a wolf anymore, not quite a dog, but definitely warm. You call her Nook. She was born in the summer from a half-tame mother that's been hanging around your group for 2 years now. Some people say she's a danger, others say she's a gift. Either way, she sleeps closer to the kids than to the meat scraps, and that says something. Quirky fact. That process, bringing animals closer, not just to eat but to live with, might be the very beginning of domestication. Scholars have long debated whether wolves first joined human groups for food, for warmth, or out of mutual convenience. But either way, the result is the same: shared heat, shared protection, and eventually a species reshaped by the company it kept. You wouldn't call Nook a pet. Not yet. But she's family in all the ways that matter. She curls up beside the fire and whines when anyone's missing. You'd miss her too if she were gone, and the warmth she gives off, better than a fur coat. That dense winter pelt is like lying next to a living hot stone. You've even caught your elders letting her crawl into their bedding at night, which they deny every morning with theatrical coughing and muttering about proper distance from beasts. Sure, Grandar, we all saw you spooning the dog. When it's really cold, like bones aching, nostrils freezing, eyelash crusting cold, your group gathers closer than ever. You pile hides over everyone, creating one massive cocoon of warmth, with only the occasional grunt or shuffle as someone tries to adjust without exposing a limb to the air. It gets claustrophobic sometimes. You've had more than one night where someone's breath fogs up your hair, or someone else's knee ends up in your back. But you don't trade warmth for comfort. Not out here. And the little ones, they're like heat batteries, full of energy, constantly squirming but so very warm. You press a child against your chest and feel their tiny fire beating inside them. You know they wouldn't last a night out there alone, so you keep them close, pass them from arm to arm like precious coals. Keeping each other warm isn't just about comfort. It's love, sure, but it's also triage. Interestingly, researchers studying modern hunter-gatherer tribes and Arctic survivalists have found similar strategies, huddling in tight groups to share heat efficiently, reducing overall energy loss. It's not just instinct, it's math. Your body burns calories to stay warm, and in bitter temperatures that costs skyrockets. By huddling, you burn less. By burning less, you survive longer. It's simple, brutal arithmetic, made bearable by body heat and shared breath. Your cave has a kind of choreography to it. At night, you sleep packed together, pelts piled like drifted snow. In the morning, you slowly emerge from the heap, one by one, grumbling and stretching like hibernating bears. You gather around the hearth, warm your hands, and quietly take stock of who made it through. You don't talk about the winters where someone didn't wake up. But those memories sit just beneath the surface, like frozen ground under a thin dusting of snow. As you sit by the fire now, rubbing warmth into your fingers, Nook pads over and plops down beside you, yawning with a jaw that could crush a rabbit skull. You lean against her, and she doesn't move. That's trust. That's a bond that could outlast the ice. Some nights you tell stories. It's a quiet way of passing the time when the wind howls too loud to sleep. One person speaks while the rest lie under the firs, eyes closed, bodies still. You share tales of the sun's return, of game running fat and easy through green valleys, of ancestors who once found a cave so warm they never wanted to leave. You don't know if any of it's true, but it helps you forget the cold just long enough to drift off. And when someone has to get up, either to stoke the fire or answer nature's call, it's a tiny tragedy. They wince, gasp, and crawl reluctantly from the warmth, swearing under their breath as they expose flesh to the night air. But when they return, you make room for them without a word. The pile shifts, arms open, heat flows back in. By morning, the cave smells like damp fur and smoke. Someone's already pulling on boots, ready to face the day. But for just a few more moments, you stay nestled between familiar bodies, sharing the simplest, most ancient strategy of all. Stay close, stay warm, stay alive. The cold doesn't care that your fingers are numb, or that the wind has found a way to slice through the tiny cracks in the cave wall. It doesn't care that your teeth are chattering like you've swallowed a bag of angry cicadas. So you do what your ancestors did, and what their ancestors probably did before them. You make tools. Not just weapons or blades for carving meat, but delicate, clever little things, like needles, bone, flint, and even antler whittled to fine points, thin enough to slide through thick animal hide. And with those needles, you make warmth. You're sitting cross-legged near the fire, a bundle of half-scraped hides at your side, with your sewing kit tucked neatly into a leather pouch. Inside it, bone needles, sinew threads, and a few odds and ends. A bead here, a carved bit of ivory there. Your fingers ache from the cold, but the movement helps. You thread the sinew through the eye of the needle, a maddening task that requires just the right amount of moisture and patience, and begin to stitch two pieces of fox fur together. You're making mittens or something mitten adjacent. A new idea. You've seen what happens to people who go barehanded in the deep freeze. Blackened fingertips, cracked knuckles, pieces of skin flaking off like bark. Not pretty. You're not interested in becoming a cautionary tale. This is where the subtle genius of Stone Age technology shines. The tools aren't complex by modern standards, but they're beautifully functional. The bone needles, polished smooth, are strong enough to push through hide but flexible enough not to snap under pressure. You've broken your fair share and each one stings, literally and emotionally. It can take hours to shape a new one, starting with a splinter of reindeer rib, sanding it down with gritty rock, and drilling a tiny eye with the tip of a flint blade. You've lost needles in the dirt and wept over them like fallen comrades. Once you've stitched the basic shape of the mittens, you begin adding small strips of fur to the inside, layering it for insulation. This is your trick, borrowed from an elder who claims to have seen it in a dream. You're not sure about the dream part, but it works. The more layers you add, the warmer it gets, and your fingers will thank you for it next time you're scraping ice from a carcass in the early dawn. As you sew, others nearby are working too. One woman's braiding sinew into thread, carefully separating the fibres with a bone comb. A boy is sharpening a flint scraper on a flat rock, sending sparks of powder into the air. It's quiet but focused. This is the slow work, the cold work, the kind that keeps you alive when the storm hits. And the clothing? It's not just stitched together, it's engineered. Your winter gear has layers of purpose. The inner garments are soft, usually rabbit or hare, because the fur is fine and cosy. The outer layers are tougher, elk, deer, sometimes bear if you're lucky or foolish, enough to tangle with one and win. You use different types of hides for different parts of the body. Feet need flexibility and insulation. Legs need protection from wet snow and low brush. Your chest needs everything: warmth, wind blocking, and the ability to move without feeling like you're wrapped in a boulder. You've even made adjustments over time: slits for ventilation, ties to tighten areas against the wind, patches that double as pockets for fire-starting kits. Every season teaches you something new. Last winter, a seam on your shoulder tore in a windstorm. You patched it with birch bark, but that only lasted a week. This year, you reinforced it with overlapping scraps, triple-stitched with braided sinew. It's ugly, but it holds. Quirky detail? You once tried to make snow goggles, just a strip of bark with a narrow slit cut in the centre. You heard the people from the northern ice flats use them to prevent snow blindness. You laughed at the idea, until your cousin stumbled in with eyes red as coals after a day out on the glacier. Snowlight isn't soft, it blinds. Now your homemade bark goggles hang from your belt like a badge of wisdom. The debate still lingers among scholars. How early did humans really start making tailored clothing? Some argue the first true garments appeared around 40,000 years ago, maybe even earlier. The archaeological record is tricky. Bone needles show up in caves, but clothing doesn't fossilise, so all we really have are the tools, and a few fortunate burials where people were wrapped in fur and buried with their kits. But if they could see you now, stitching with practised hands and a scowl of concentration, they'd probably nod and say, "Yeah, this one knows what they're doing." You pause to test the new mittens. They fit a little awkwardly, but they'll do. You slip your hands into them and flex your fingers. Already you can feel the difference. Warmth blooms gently across your palms. You smile, small but real, another victory over the cold. Later you move on to repairs. Your boots are splitting at the toes again. You remove the outer layer, exposing the stuffed moss insulation. It's damp, not good. You toss it out and replace it with dry bark fibres, then reinforce the seam with a cross-stitch, muttering under your breath about how this better hold through the next snowstorm. You love your boots like you love your fire, begrudgingly, but with absolute dependence. Nearby someone chuckles. Your boots talking back again? You grunt, not bothering to look up. It's a running joke now, how you argue with your clothing like it's a stubborn friend. But hey, when it's your last line of defence against death by frostbite, you get a little emotionally invested. The sun is sinking again, casting long shadows through the cave's mouth. You pack up your tools, tuck the new mittens into your belt, and settle near the fire as the others gather around. The smell of hide and smoke clings to everything, but it's a comfort now. It smells like effort, like survival. You flex your newly protected fingers and listen to the wind whistling outside. You're ready for tomorrow. Whatever it brings, cold, snow, ice-laced wind, you'll meet it with stitched hides, patched boots, and a full-body outfit of not today frostbite. That's what Stone Age tailoring looks like. Not fancy, not sleek, but warm enough to keep you alive. And in this world, that's the only fashion trend that matters. The chill is deeper today. The kind that doesn't just bite at your skin, but seems to leak into your bones, like it's trying to set up camp there for the season. You wake beneath a tangle of hides, groggy and sore, and when you lift your head, your breath billows out in a thick white plume. It's not even light out yet, and already the cold has moved into the cave like an unwanted guest. So, you do what you've learned to do, layer up. Not just any layering, number. This is a strategy, a daily ritual, perfected by experience and the desperate desire not to turn into an ice sculpture. You start with a soft underlayer, hair fur, worn smooth from use, tied snugly around your body. It's the closest thing you'll ever know to thermal underwear. The inner layer traps the warmth your body naturally produces, hugging it close, not letting a single degree of heat go to waste. Next comes the middle layer. That one's thicker, deer hide, maybe elk if you were lucky last season. This part does the heavy lifting. It keeps the warm air from escaping and adds bulk, which isn't always ideal when you're trying to scramble up a rocky slope, but it's better than having your ribs freeze mid-breath. You tie it at the waist with a braided sinew belt and pull the sleeves tight around your wrists. Your movements are stiff now, restricted, but at least you're not shivering. Over that goes the outer shell, the armour, bare hide if you're really fancy, or layered wolf pelt stitched into a kind of patchwork cloak. It's heavy. It smells like smoke and old sweat. But it blocks the wind like nothing else. You pull it over your shoulders, fasten it with a carved antler toggle at the chest, and immediately feel the buffer it creates, like you're wrapping yourself in the thick, silent hush of the forest. Your legs get the same treatment. Fur leggings tied with leather cords at the knees and ankles, with more moss stuffed inside for insulation. Then boots, fur-wrapped and layered with dry grass, bound tight to keep the snow from sneaking in. You cinch everything with strips of hide, and not one part of you is exposed to the air, not unless you want frostbite gnawing at your ears. Even your head gets attention. You slip on a crude cap made from the scalp of a fox, its ears still flopping slightly when you move. It's ridiculous, and you know it, but it works. A strip of wolf fur wraps around your neck, another around your mouth. The only thing showing are your eyes, and even they squint against the bite of the air when you finally step outside. And here's the part that makes it all worth it. You feel warmer the moment you step out. Not because the air is any better, it's not, it's worse, but because your layers are working. The wind buffets your back and shoulders and slides off like water from stone. You can walk, even run, without crying into your scarf. It's a victory. A daily one, but a victory all the same. There's something oddly elegant about the way you've learned to layer. The warmth comes not just from what you're wearing, but how you're wearing it. Each part plays a role. If one fails, the whole system fails. If your wrist ties come undone, cold air sneaks in and chills your arms. If your leggings slip, you lose heat from the largest muscles in your body. If your boots get wet, game over. You might as well lie down and start dictating your last will and testament to the nearest snow hare. It's not just about putting things on, it's about putting them on right. And you've had time to get good at it. Years of trial and error, of bleeding knuckles and cracked skin, of near misses and full disasters. You've seen what happens when someone skimps on layering, usually because they think it's just a quick trip outside or not that cold. There's no such thing as not that cold out here. The cold waits, it watches, and the moment you let your guard down, it wraps its fingers around your spine and pulls. Still, you manage to move well. Your layers are tight enough not to flap, but loose enough not to restrict. You've got slits sewn into the thighs of your tunic for mobility, and the armpits are reinforced with extra stitching because that's where fabric wears fastest. Your boots are flexible, laced tight across the instep but loose at the toes to keep circulation going. These aren't clothes, they're survival suits. And this technique, this whole philosophy of layering, scholars would eventually label it clothing systems, the precursor to every insulated jacket or Gore-Tex shell you've ever seen. But right now, you don't need a name for it. You just know it works. Funny side note, one of your cousins insists on wearing her layers in reverse, fur out, leather in, claims it's warmer. You've argued about it multiple times around the fire. She says the fur traps warm air better on the outside. You say the leather blocks wind better. Honestly, it probably depends on the weather. Some researchers think early humans may have alternated depending on the season, the terrain, or even personal preference. Maybe your cousin's just stubborn. Maybe she's secretly a genius. Either way, she's not frozen, so you let her win that one, for now. You've also seen some start using snow as insulation. Not in the clothes, thank goodness, but packed into crevices between layers, or even lining the outside of shelters. It's strange, but snow, when packed tightly, actually traps heat. It's another layer, just one you can't move around in. Still, it makes you think. You watch the way the world adapts and realise you're not so different. The birds fluff up their feathers, the foxes tunnel under snowbanks, and you? You stack fur like a sandwich and strut out like you own the glacier. By midday you're hauling firewood through knee-deep snow and not even cursing about it. That's the real test. If you can work without freezing, your clothing's doing its job. And right now, your layers are golden. You're sweating a little, which is a problem. You'll need to cool down or risk freezing when it stops. But still, it's a better issue to have than chattering your teeth down to nubs. So you pause, strip off your outer layer, and hang it over a branch for a moment. Beneath, the inner layers do their thing. Your body steams in the cold like a fresh kill. You catch your breath, adjust the belt around your waist, and keep moving. This isn't comfort, it's management. A system of heat, sweat, and strategy. Layering isn't glamorous. It doesn't win you points. But it does keep you alive, and honestly, that's the only kind of fashion show you care about right now. Out here, nature is both your greatest threat and your best teacher. When the cold turns vicious and your breath hangs frozen in front of your face like a challenge, you start paying attention to what survives. Not the trees, most of them are stripped bare or snapped by the wind. Not the rivers, they're stiff as bones under their icy skins. But the animals, the ones that are still moving, still breathing, still warm, yeah, those guys know a thing or two, so you start borrowing from them. You watch how birds fluff their feathers before settling down, creating little bubbles of heat. You see foxes curl into balls, tucking their noses under their tails, using their own bodies like blankets. Even the lowly vole, that tiny scrap of fur with legs, digs tunnels beneath the snow, using the thick top layer as insulation instead of a death sentence. It's humbling, really. You've got fire and furs and tools, and still, you're out here stealing tips from rodents. But it works. Today the snow is relentless. Thick flakes fall without mercy, muffling sound swallowing the sky. You're stuck inside the cave, hunched by the fire, and your mind starts spinning. What if you could make your bedding warmer by mimicking what the animals do? So you start layering it differently, lining the ground with dry branches first, then moss, then a thick quilt of dried grasses. You learned that moss acts like a sponge, but when it's dry, it holds heat. And when you place it between the furs and the floor, suddenly your backside doesn't feel like it's lying directly on a frozen rock slab. You grab more materials, twigs, bark, feathers from last week's plucked grouse, and start weaving them into your sleeping platform. It's crude, yeah, but it's brilliant. You're making a nest. Not as fancy as a bird's, but close enough. And it works. When you lie down later that night, wrapped in furs and surrounded by your homemade insulation, the cold doesn't hit you as hard. It's not gone. No, never gone. But it's bearable, and bearable out here is the new paradise. You're not the only one figuring this out. Across the cave, someone started stuffing rabbit fur into their boot lining. Another person is weaving strips of bark into a mat, layering it with pine needles for a makeshift ground pad. Innovation is catching like fire, and just like that, the whole group starts thinking like squirrels. Here's a quirky detail. You once saw someone use porcupine quills to hold moss together. It was kind of genius. They wrapped it in a deerskin pouch and stuffed it inside their shirt, where it acted like a hot pack. One even added warm stones inside it, a portable heater that didn't require a fire once it was built. The whole thing smelled terrible, but hey, no frostbite. Trade-offs. Now, you might be wondering, why doesn't everyone just build huge fires and call it a day? Because fire is greedy. It eats wood like a starving bear eats roots in the spring, and in the deep winter, dry wood is harder to find than a warm rock to sit on. You can't just keep feeding it forever. You've got to find ways to keep the heat you do make from escaping. That's where insulation comes in. You start plugging gaps in the cave walls with mud and grass. It hardens fast in the cold, and though it cracks eventually, it still helps block the wind. You wedge snow into the bigger crevices, packing it tight like mortar. It sounds crazy. Insulating with snow. but snow is a surprisingly effective barrier, full of air pockets that trap warmth. The same principle that keeps burrowing animals alive works just as well for you. Even your clothing starts getting insulated differently. Instead of just layering furs, you begin adding stuffing, bits of dried grass sewn into pouches between layers of hide. One of the elders does it to her tunic, and suddenly everyone wants grass-stuffed coats. You call them crunch jackets because they rustle when you move. They're not stealthy, but they're warm, and warmth always wins. There's debate among the firekeepers, those in charge of managing the daily flame, about whether it's better to keep the fire low and close or big and central. The low fire folks argue that too much heat rises and escapes through the top of the cave. The others say a big fire heats the stones better, and the rocks radiate warmth for longer. You don't take sides, really. You just start lining your sleeping area with those hot stones after dark, whether the fire's modest or massive. After all, stones don't argue, they just stay warm. Even the walls are getting attention now. You start hanging extra hides along the inside of the cave, pinning them with sharpened sticks. It's like adding curtains. Not decorative, though some of the kids draw crude animals on them with charcoal, but functional. They block drafts and add another layer between you and the frigid world outside. It's like turning a rocky tomb into a fur-lined burrow. And here's something researchers still argue about. How much did prehistoric people really learn from animals versus figuring things out on their own? Did someone see a fox burrow into a snowdrift and say, "Hey, we could do that too"? Or was it all parallel evolution? Humans and animals just arriving at the same hacks through different kinds of desperation? The answer is probably both. But you know one thing for sure. Out here, you stop seeing yourself as separate from the natural world. You're just another animal, trying not to freeze. One of the kids gets the idea to make a sort of windbreak at the cave entrance. A little half wall of packed snow and hide, designed to divert the worst of the gusts. You help them build it, stacking stones and snow together until the air near the front of the cave feels a little less bitey. It's not a door, not really, but it's a barrier, another layer between you and the cold. That night, you settle into your grass-lined bed, tucked between hide walls and hot stones, wearing your crunch jacket and listening to the soft exhale of the fire. You realise that everything in your world now is about insulation, between your body and the cold, between your family and the wind, between life and the creeping fingers of winter. You're not just surviving out here, you're evolving, one pelt, one moss mat, one squirrel-brained idea at a time. There's something magical about the way smoke curls through a cave when everything's working right. Not the choking, eye-watering kind that sends everyone coughing into the snow, but the soft ribbons that rise up and drift lazily toward the exit like they know the way out. When that happens, when the fire is calm and the air is breathable and your hides don't smell like a barbecue gone wrong, you know you've hit the sweet spot. Because managing smoke in a cave without freezing to death, that's a high-wire act with no safety net. This morning you wake to find the fire still glowing, embers tucked neatly beneath a few half-burnt logs, but the cave is thick with haze. Someone must have added damp wood in the middle of the night. Again. Your throat feels like it's been sanded, your eyes sting, and your nose is doing that thing where it just gives up and starts running like a thawed-out stream. You sit up coughing, wave the air pointlessly, and immediately head for the cave entrance where the air is sharp but at least breathable. That's when you realise it's time to deal with the smoke problem again. Fire is life. You need it for heat, for light, for cooking. But without a chimney or any kind of modern ventilation, it's also a massive liability. You've learned the hard way that fire in a cave is a balancing act between warmth and oxygen, light and suffocation. You can't just toss on logs and hope for the best. You have to treat it like a living thing, feed it right, give it space to breathe, and always, always watch the smoke. So today, you get to work. First step? You dig a small trench in the centre of the hearth, shallow but deep enough to allow better airflow underneath the fuel. Then you rearrange the stones around it, not just in a circle, but in a more intentional way. Higher on one side to help direct the smoke outward. It's crude geometry, but it works. You even prop up a flat rock at an angle behind the fire, a kind of smoke shelf, to push the rising air toward the mouth of the cave. Next, you deal with the fuel, no more damp wood. You sort your pile ruthlessly, tossing anything that's even thinking about being wet. You pull the driest branches from the back, split them thinner to ensure a cleaner burn, and start stacking them in a lattice pattern over the glowing coals. It catches fast, flames licking up in neat lines, the smoke thinner already. The wind helps today. It's coming in from behind the cave, creating a natural draft. You watch in satisfaction as the smoke lifts, swirls, and drifts out in a clean stream. You can breathe again. Everyone in the cave exhales with you. There's a bit of a myth floating around that smoke always rises straight up. Not in a cave. In a cave, it drifts, it clings, it fights you. You've had nights where it pooled near the ceiling and slowly crept down like a predator. You've even built small air holes near the top of the entrance before, poking through the snowpack with sharpened sticks, trying to give the smoke a better escape route without letting too much cold air pour in. Some days it worked, others not so much. Still, you keep trying. Quirky fact, you once experimented with building a wind tunnel using mammoth ribs and stretched hide. It was supposed to suck the smoke out through the top of the cave. Instead, it fell over in the night and almost set someone's hair on fire. You don't talk about that one much, but the char mark is still there on the ceiling, a quiet reminder that not all innovation is genius. The debate around prehistoric ventilation systems is real. Archaeologists have found evidence of scorched ceilings and blackened cave roofs that suggest our ancestors didn't always get it right either. Some caves, especially the deep ones used for painting or ceremony, have no sign of active fires, probably because the smoke would have turned them into death traps. Others show signs of long-term use and careful smoke management, including flat hearthstones and built-up fire pits in places that promote airflow. Today your fire pit is drawing well. The cave is warming up, but the smoke isn't hanging heavy. You lean back against the wall, watching the flicker of light on stone, and think about how much easier it would be with a chimney. But you don't have a chimney. You have ingenuity and a stubborn will to breathe. Someone suggests hanging wet hides along the walls to trap the smoke near the roof, kind of like a smoke curtain. You try it, and weirdly, it helps. The air feels clearer near the ground where everyone sits, while the smoke collects higher up and slowly seeps toward the entrance. It's not perfect, but it's better. Then there's the cooking issue. Cooking in a cave is tricky, especially when the fire's indoors. Too much meat, and the fat drips flaring up into greasy clouds. You start using flat stones to cook on instead. Set them near the coals, let them get hot, and lay strips of meat across the top. It's slower, but no smoke. Plus, the food tastes less like a chimney and more like actual meat. Later, someone suggests an outside fire pit for cooking when the weather's calm. You build one just beyond the cave entrance, shielded with a wall of snow and rock, and assign a few people to cook out there when the wind allows. It's not cozy, but it keeps the air inside clean, and that's a trade everyone's willing to make. And of course, there's the ritual of fire maintenance. You assign someone to stay up through the night, feeding the fire just enough to keep it alive without waking everyone up coughing. You rotate shifts, so no one gets stuck too long. It's become a sacred task almost. The fire watcher, guardian of warmth and lungs. Tonight the smoke curls thin and ghost-like, rising in a graceful arc before slipping out the cave mouth. You lie back under your furs, the air clearer than it's been in days. Your eyes sting a little from earlier, but now they're closing. You've learned a hard truth about winter in a cave. Smoke can kill you just as easily as cold can. But if you listen, if you pay attention, if you learn its dance, you can live with it. You can make it part of the rhythm of survival, so you sleep wrapped in hide, breathing air that's earned, not just by fire, but by thought, by trial, by the quiet determination to stay one step ahead of the ice. The snow is deep this morning, deeper than you've seen it all season. It comes up past your knees when you try to walk through it, and it clings to your legs like cold sand. The wind has calmed for now, but the air still carries that sharp metallic sting that makes your nose burn and your eyes water. Even wrapped in layers of fur and hide, you feel it pressing in. Today's the kind of day that tests your limits, the kind where, if you weren't already prepared, you'd seriously consider whether the mammoth's trunk might make a cozy sleeping bag. And yet, as the tribe gathers near the cave mouth, you all share the same unspoken thought. Maybe it's time to move. Not far, just far enough. Because while caves are great for shelter, they're not always in the best places for food, water, or sunlight. And in a winter like this, staying in the wrong spot for too long is a mistake you only make once. So the debate begins. Some want to tough it out. They argue the cave has good walls, good airflow, a stable hearth. Others, you included, are eyeing the southern horizon. You remember stories from the elders, of how your people used to follow the warmth, not just the herds. Back then, before this cave, before this mountain, they'd walk for days, chasing sunlight like it owed them something. That's when the word gets tossed out. Migration. It's a big word for a big idea. It means leaving the known for the maybe better. And it's not just a whim, it's a survival strategy older than your language. Animals migrate. They move toward warmth, toward food, toward life. And your people? You've been doing the same thing for thousands of years. The decision's not made lightly. You gather around the fire that night, every face lit in flickering amber. Voices rise and fall, some angry, some hesitant. The thought of leaving the cave behind after all the effort, all the insulation and smoke taming and hot stone hacks, it stings. But you know the signs. The animals are thinning out. The snow is packing harder. The cave's entrance is slowly being swallowed. If you don't move soon, you may not be able to move at all. So the next morning the preparations begin. You strip down your gear to what's essential. Warm clothing, fire-starting kits, food, water skins, weapons. Everything else stays. No dragging extra hides or bulky stones. You've learned that on the trail. Every ounce costs you warmth. You pack smart, not sentimental. That fire-charred rock you've sat on all season? It doesn't get to come. You give it a little nod and move on. Then comes the hard part. The walk. You step out into the blinding white, your breath freezing instantly, your lashes crusting with tiny icicles. The group moves slowly, each person carrying their own weight, literally and emotionally. The little ones are bundled tight and carried on shoulders or sleds made from bent branches and sinew bindings. You've looped a rope across your chest, dragging your own sled with supplies behind you like a very cold, very determined pack mule. The goal is simple: move south. Not forever, just to lower elevation, or somewhere the wind doesn't scream like a dying mammoth. Somewhere with more game, maybe even sunlight. You don't need paradise, you just need better than this. Migration isn't glamorous, it's exhausting. Your legs ache, your shoulders burn, and the cold gnaws at your toes through even the best boots. You stop only when you absolutely must, to rest, to eat, to warm up by a quickly built fire in a shallow snow pit. You've learned how to dig them deep enough to block the wind, but shallow enough to let the heat rise. You huddle close, eat quickly, and move on. One quirky innovation: someone in your group, probably the same genius who came up with grass-stuffed coats, built a windbreak shield out of stretched hide across 2 long branches. It's like a portable wall. 2 people carry it at the front of the group, and everyone else walks behind, shielded from the worst of the gusts. You scoffed at first, but after a few hours of not having your face sandblasted by ice, you change your mind. Eventually, after a brutal half-day trek, you find it. A sheltered grove near a frozen stream. Trees huddle here like ancient watchmen, their trunks wide enough to block wind, their roots tucked under layers of snow. There's a rocky outcropping nearby, not a cave, but a natural wall to press your backs against. Better yet, there are signs of animals, tracks, droppings, hope. This becomes your temporary home. The group spreads out fast, moving like a seasoned unit. Fires are started, temporary shelters are thrown together, lean-tos built from fallen limbs and hides. You pack snow along the edges to seal them. It's not a cave, not by a long shot, but the air is less harsh, and there's food to be found. You set traps for small game. Others break ice on the stream, collecting water before it refreezes. You've built something new, primitive, yes, but functional. That night, as you sit by the fire, feet steaming and fingers thawing, you look up at the stars and feel a different kind of warmth. The warmth of motion, of change, of not freezing to death in the same place you were born. And this too is debated by scholars. How often did prehistoric humans migrate? Did they move with seasons or stay put and wait it out? The evidence suggests both. Some groups built semi-permanent shelters, returning year after year. Others chased the herds, always shifting, always adapting. You, right now, are the latter. A wanderer, a winter nomad, a human compass, always seeking the warmest place still available. You know you'll return to the cave someday, maybe when the snows retreat and the bears wake up cranky. You've left a stone marker near its entrance, a symbol scratched deep with flint, a simple spiral, your clan's mark. It'll be there, waiting. But for now, you rest under your makeshift roof of branches and leather, with firelight dancing across your face and the quiet crackle of snow melting on hot stones. You're not home, but you're alive. And out here, in the great frozen silence of the Ice Age, that's more than enough. You wake to the sound of someone chewing, loudly, and with purpose. It's the kind of chewing that only happens when someone's working their way through a mouthful of gristly meat, still half frozen, because their body is screaming for calories. You blink the crust from your lashes, feel the ice cracking along the edges of your furs, and realise that today is one of those days. The ones where warmth doesn't come from the fire or from the sun, but from inside you, from the burn in your belly, from fuel. Because staying warm in weather like this isn't just about insulation or firewood or animal skins, it's about fat. Glorious, greasy, body-warming fat. As soon as you sit up, your stomach growls, deep and slow, like a cave bear waking up. You're not surprised. You burned through everything you ate yesterday just dragging your sled through the snow, and now your body wants more. You crawl toward the fire where a slab of meat is sizzling on a hot stone, reindeer by the smell of it, and someone tosses you a strip like it's the last Snickers bar on earth. You don't even ask, you just eat. The fat coats your mouth instantly, warm and soft, and you can feel the heat radiate from your core within minutes. That's the magic of it. Fat doesn't just fill your belly, it heats you. You've learned to chase it like treasure, carving thick chunks off the best parts of a kill, melting it down into broth, smearing it across roasted tubers, even eating it raw in a pinch. It's the prehistoric version of central heating. You remember your first real fat feast? It was after a massive aurochs kill, an enormous shaggy beast that took 6 people and a whole afternoon to bring down. The tribe celebrated for days, not just because of the meat, but because the fatty hump and thick marrow-filled bones meant survival through the next cold snap. You ate until you couldn't move, and you slept that night like you were wrapped in the sun. Nowadays, you're more strategic. You ration the lean meat, save the fatty cuts for when the cold gets truly brutal. You've even started making a kind of trail food, strips of dried meat mixed with rendered fat and berries, pounded together into dense, greasy bars. They're ugly, they're sticky, but they pack more calories than a fire does logs. You call them brick bites. Everyone pretends to hate them, until you're halfway up a ridge in the snow and someone pulls one from their pouch like a prize, and the science behind it. Modern researchers would later marvel at how intuitive early humans were about nutrition. Fat provides more than double the calories per gram than proteins or carbohydrates, and in freezing conditions, that energy is gold. Your body doesn't just burn it for fuel, it uses it to insulate, to warm blood, to keep internal organs from turning into icy paperweights. There's even evidence, hotly debated of course, that some Ice Age groups intentionally selected prey based on fat content, that they passed on leaner animals in favour of older, fatter ones, especially when winter survival was on the line. You've done the same without ever reading a paper on it. Instinct, maybe, or just hard-earned wisdom. Quirky fact. You once watched someone skim rendered fat off a cooking stone and smear it directly onto their chest, said it kept the wind out. Honestly, they weren't wrong. It smelled like a fried duck, but the grease formed a barrier against the cold air. You haven't tried it, yet, but you've thought about it more than once during a windstorm. You also keep a stash of pure fat in a sealed bladder near the fire, like a backup heat source. On especially bitter nights, you melt a bit and drink it like soup. It's not delicious, but it works. That slow, deep warmth spreading from your gut, that survival in its purest, oiliest form. This morning, once you've eaten your share, you move on to one of the most important tasks of the day, splitting marrow bones. The legs of the reindeer are thick and frozen, but inside they hold one of nature's most perfect winter foods, rich, fatty, and full of nutrients. You crack the bone with a stone hammer, careful not to shatter it completely, then scoop out the pale marrow with a sliver of wood. It tastes like velvet, like fire, like something ancient and perfect. You pass some to a younger tribe member and watch their eyes widen as the warmth hits them. It's like they just woke up for the first time all winter. Later you help render more fat over the fire. You place chunks of meat and sweet on hot stones, collecting the drippings in a shallow bowl carved from antler. It smells heavy and smoky, but it keeps you standing. You even experiment with mixing in pine needles for flavour. Not bad, honestly. And you tell yourself the resin might even be medicinal. Probably. There's debate still among archaeologists about how much early humans understood food chemistry. Did you know, on some deep level, that fat helped stave off hypothermia? Or was it simply that the hungriest parts of you knew what worked and told your hands to keep hunting for more of it? doesn't really matter. You know one thing for sure. No one survives a winter on lean meat alone. That's the quickest path to something modern folks call rabbit starvation. You call it dropping dead with a full belly. It's the kind of irony the Ice Age loves. So fat becomes more than food. It becomes strategy. A stored source of heat, a cooking fuel, a tool for waterproofing, even a base for lamp oil. You soak moss in it and use it for light. You smear it into your boots to keep them pliable. You mix it with ash to make a primitive balm for frostbite. There is no part of it you waste. As the fire dies down that night, you press a hand to your stomach, still full from your second round of marrow and roast. You're warm, not just from the fire, not just from the hides, but from the inside out. You lie back against your pile of furs, listen to the soft breathing of those around you, and feel something you haven't felt in a while. Solid. Safe. Tomorrow, the snow might come harder. You might run out of dry wood. The wind might shift and turn your camp into a wind tunnel. But tonight, you've got fire in your belly and grease on your fingers. That's as close to comfort as it gets out here. By the time you've finished gnawing the last bite off a roasted bone, the sky outside is already darkening again. Not night, just winter's early gloom setting in like a bad mood. The air feels heavy, like snow's coming, and that familiar hush has crept into the landscape. The kind where sound gets swallowed before it can travel. You know what's coming. Not just a little flurry, a deep freeze, a smothering. The kind of cold that seeps into the ground and settles there like it's paying rent. So naturally you decide to dig yourself a hole, not because you're giving up, but because you've learned something new, something you never thought you'd try. Snow shelters. Sounds ridiculous, right? Building a shelter out of the very thing that's trying to kill you? But turns out snow isn't just cold, it's complicated. When packed the right way, snow traps air, and air traps heat. It's how foxes survive under snowdrifts, how bears snore away entire winters, and now, you're about to dig into the cold to find warmth. You start with a snowbank, thick, solid, settled. None of that powdery nonsense that collapses when you sneeze near it. This snow's dense, crusted over from days of wind and cold. Perfect. You carve into it with a flat stone digging sideways rather than down, always sideways. You're not digging a grave, you're making a den. It's slow work. The cold bites at your cheeks and your fingers go numb more than once, even with fur-wrapped mittens. You sweat, which is dangerous, so you take breaks. But by mid-afternoon, you've hollowed out a space just big enough to crawl inside and sit hunched over. You scrape the ceiling into a dome so condensation doesn't drip on your head, and you smooth the floor so you don't roll into an awkward frost-kissed ball while sleeping. Then comes the entrance trick. You dig a little trench that drops down before rising back up into the main chamber. Why? Because cold air sinks. You've learned this the hard way in every drafty shelter you've ever cursed. This design keeps the cold trapped in the lower pocket, while your breath and body heat rise into the space where you actually want to be. It's insulation by design, and it works. Sort of. You throw some branches down on the floor for bedding, then hides, then yourself, and once you're inside, you do something you never thought possible in a snow hole. You get warm. The silence inside is absolute. You can hear your own heartbeat. Your breath hits the curved walls and curls back like it's got nowhere better to go. For a moment, you lie there, motionless, just listening. The wind howls outside, but inside it's like being inside the belly of a glacier that's decided to treat you nicely. Snow shelter, Quincy, some people might call it one day, or snow cave, or maybe just miracle. You don't care what it's called, you just care that it works. Back at camp, others are trying the same. Some use slabs of snow to build igloo-style domes. Those take more skill, and some pretty solid geometry, but the results are stunning. Compact, warm, and surprisingly strong. One kid climbs on top of one just to prove it won't collapse. It doesn't. You're impressed. Also slightly concerned. You experiment more over the next few days. One night you dig a 2-person shelter, testing whether shared body heat really makes a difference. Spoiler, it does. You wake up with your back sweating and your face frozen, but overall, not bad. Another time, you try lighting a tiny oil lamp inside, made from a carved-out stone filled with melted fat and a moss wick. It smokes a little, but the warmth is immediate. You're cautious, though. You've heard horror stories of people suffocating in closed spaces. Ventilation becomes your next project. You start poking small holes near the roof, making sure there's always an air exchange. One night, you even try sleeping with a hollow reed between your lips, a trick someone claimed would prevent CO2 buildup. You wake up feeling lightheaded and immediately throw the reed across the snowfield. Not every hack is a winner. There's debate among your group now. Some think these snow shelters might be better than the cave. More mobile, more adaptable. Others argue the cave offers long-term stability. But for now, while you're migrating and chasing warmth wherever it hides, these icy little homes are perfect. And archaeologists, they're still scratching their heads about this stuff. There's limited evidence of snow shelter use, mostly because, well, snow doesn't fossilise. But modern Inuit and other Arctic cultures have used them for generations, and it's entirely likely that Ice Age people, facing the same conditions, figured it out too. Maybe not the exact same shape, or with blocks carved like puzzle pieces, but the concept, the science, that was always there, just waiting for someone to get desperate and clever enough. Here's a quirky memory. One time, while digging a snow cave, you hit a patch of yellow. Not good yellow, not sunshine, animal yellow. You bailed out fast, heart pounding, and later found out you'd tunnelled into the den of a sleeping wolverine. A very unhappy wolverine. You apologised in several languages and spent the night on a tree branch instead. You've learned to read the snow now. How it layers, how it packs, how wind changes its shape. You can tell when it'll collapse, when it's safe to dig, and when it's better to just pile it up yourself and shape it like wet clay. You use snow not just for shelter, but for structure, walls, windbreaks, even cold storage. You bury your meat in it, letting the natural freezer do its job. By the end of the week, the camp has turned into a patchwork of snow burrows and hide tents, all clustered around shared fire pits. At night, the whole scene glows faintly under the moonlight, little hills and domes of ice steaming slightly where warmth escapes. Inside your shelter you lie back, wrapped in your usual layers, with a warm stone tucked near your belly and a fire-drip lamp flickering in the corner. It's small, it's damp, it's probably going to collapse eventually, but right now it's a miracle of survival, built not with bricks or wood, but with cold itself, turned inside out. And as the wind howls outside, passing over your snow cave like a ghost denied entry, you close your eyes and feel something rare for this season. Comfort. Not warmth exactly, but close enough to dream by. You're huddled by the fire, chewing a bit of dried meat that tastes suspiciously like it used to be something small and fast, when you notice Nook pressing her cold nose into your side. She's not begging, not exactly, but she knows you'll give her the last bite. You always do. You tear it in half, offer her the larger piece, and she takes it gently, tail thumping once before she retreats to her usual spot by the fire, curling up tight with her snout tucked under her tail. Her body rises and falls in a slow rhythm, and just watching her breathe makes you feel warmer. Domesticated warmth, that's what you call it now. It's strange to think about it, but this curled up creature at your feet, is part of the reason you've made it through some of the worst nights this winter. Nook isn't just company, she's heat, she's early warning, she's comfort. And somehow, without ceremony or contracts or language, she's become family. You're not sure when it happened, really. A few seasons ago, a she-wolf started hanging around the perimeter of your camp. She didn't growl, didn't challenge, just watched. She kept her distance until the scraps started getting tossed a little closer. Then came a litter, and one of those pups, curious, bold, quiet, stayed. Nook. Now she sleeps with the children, guards the meat pile, and sniffs the wind before any of you hear a sound. She chose you, in a way, and you let her. Others have noticed the benefits too. More and more of your people are letting these not-quite wolves settle closer. They're not tame exactly, not trained, not owned, but something shifting. You see someone rubbing frost off their own face and then doing the same for the animal beside them. You see pups play fighting with children, mimicking their movements like they've always belonged. And when the fire dies down at night, it's not uncommon to wake up with fur against fur, human and canine tangled together in a shared need for warmth. The warmth is mutual. These animals benefit from you just as much. You share meat, you offer fire, you provide shelter, however crude. And in return, they give you their instincts, their ears and noses and bodies tuned to the natural world in ways you'll never match. They hear things long before you do, smell danger coming on the wind, sense movement in the snow beyond the firelight. More than once, Nook has warned you about predators before your eyes even opened. And that's where things get interesting. You start adjusting your camp layout to accommodate the dogs, or proto-dogs, depending on how technical you want to get. A separate hide space for them near the fire. Small troughs scraped into the snow for food scraps. You even reinforce the lean-to walls near where they sleep, knowing they'll keep the space warmer through sheer body heat alone. They're part of the system now, part of the survival plan. There's still some skepticism, of course. One of the elders swears the animals will steal your soul in the night. Another mutters about fleas, though, let's be honest. Everything has fleas at this point. But most of the group has stopped arguing. It's hard to fight a creature who lays its head on your leg and keeps your feet from freezing off. Quirky observation? One of the kids has started carving little bone amulets in the shape of wolves. She wears one around her neck, claims it keeps her safe in dreams. You smile at that. She's not wrong. When Nook sleeps beside her, she doesn't cry out at night like she used to. There's something ancient and primal about the comfort of another heartbeat. Researchers still debate when domestication really began. Was it thousands of years ago with intentional breeding and territory marking? Or was it more gradual, a slow, shared evolution of two species choosing each other? You don't need data. You live the answer every day. It wasn't about dominance. It was about trust. A moment when two creatures, cold and hungry, and tired of watching the dark alone, decided to sit a little closer to the fire together. You remember one night vividly. The wind was howling like it was hunting. Your fire had burned low. You couldn't sleep. You kept thinking you heard something. Shifting snow, a snapping branch. You didn't want to wake the others, didn't want to seem paranoid. So you sat up, eyes scanning the blackness outside. That's when Nook moved. No growl, no bark, just a low guttural sound in her throat. She stood, ears forward, body tense. You followed her gaze, and there it was, barely visible in the fire's edge, a shape, watching. It never came closer, but it didn't need to. You knew what it was, a lynx maybe, or worse, but Nook didn't flinch. And you? You suddenly didn't feel alone. You start thinking of these animals as part of the tribe. Not equal maybe, but essential. You mark births, mourn losses. One of the older males died last week and you buried him with a bit of meat and a smooth stone. Same as anyone. He'd guarded your camp for 2 winters. He deserved that much. Now, when you look at the group sleeping at night, it's hard to tell where the people end and the dogs begin. Fur and flesh, breath and bone, all tangled in one warm sleeping pile. You've created something here. Not just shelter, not just survival, but partnership. A pact written in firelight and frostbite. And as you drift off, Nook tucked against your side, you wonder what the future will call this moment. The beginning of domestication? Maybe. But for now, it's simpler than that. It's warmth, it's safety, it's life with a heartbeat beside your own. You're woken in the middle of the night by a muffled thump near your feet. Heavy, but not alarming. You groan, squinting through the dark toward the edge of the sleeping pile. Someone's just dropped a stone the size of a melon into the snow. Again. You blink, annoyed but curious, as they shuffle over, push the rock aside with their foot, and settle back under the hides. You've seen them do this before, collect a stone, heat it by the fire, then carry it into their bedding like a prehistoric hot water bottle. It looks absurd. It also works. So naturally you start doing it too. The next evening, after dinner and before curling up for the night, you search through the snowy ground for a flat, solid rock. Not too big, you're not trying to herniate yourself, but not too small either. You find a smooth chunk of granite with just enough mass to hold heat. You brush it clean, set it at the edge of the fire, and wait. This is the part you didn't expect. How satisfying it is to watch a rock transform. The fire licks against its surface like it's whispering secrets. At first the stone darkens, then it starts to emit that dry, dusty smell, like earth right before a storm. You give it time. Rushing this means cracked stones and disappointed toes. You've seen that happen. The rookie mistake, using a rock that's been near water. Those explode. You learned that lesson during your first winter when a damp stone burst and sent sharp pieces flying into someone's stew. But this one's solid, dry, patient. When it's finally hot enough that you can't touch it for more than a second, you fish it out of the coals with a pair of antler tongs, wrap it tightly in thick hide, and carry it, gingerly, to your sleeping spot. You tuck it near your stomach first. letting the warmth seep through the layers of fur, then down near your legs thawing frozen calves. The heat is heavy, real, grounding. It's not like the fire, open, flickering at risk of blowing out. This is quiet heat, deep heat. It doesn't draw attention to itself, it just is. The others catch on fast. Soon, everyone's got their own personal hot stone. You start lining them up at the fire after meals, a row of heating companions waiting their turn. One of the kids names hers Pebble, despite it being the size of her head. Another names his Bernie, because he forgot the hide wrap and nearly branded himself. You don't stop at bedtime either. Hot stones start showing up in clever places, tucked into the bottom of boots before a long walk, nestled into snow shelters as a radiant core, even set beneath hide-draped frames as makeshift warm seats. One elder builds a seat with a hollowed-out base and slides a hot stone underneath it, sighing like he's discovered fire all over again. This is when the real creativity kicks in. You try heating multiple stones at once, rotating them like you're running a laundromat for warmth. While one's cooling in your bed, the next is heating at the fire. It becomes a cycle, an economy of thermal energy. You even experiment with wrapping the stones in layers, first hide, then moss, then more hide. It makes the heat last longer. You're basically making prehistoric thermoses, and it feels like magic. Quirky use? Someone tries putting herbs inside the wrap. Juniper, maybe some dried pine, and suddenly your warm stone smells like a forest. It doesn't do much for the cold, but it makes the whole place smell less like meat breath and unwashed hides. That's a win. You also learn what not to do, like heating stones too close to the fire and forgetting about them. One night, a stone gets so hot it starts smouldering the hide it's wrapped in. The smell wakes everyone up. You spend the next hour flapping fur and yelling. You lose the hide, but the lesson sticks. And here's the thing. This method isn't just you being clever. There's archaeological support that early humans may have used fire-heated stones in similar ways. Hot rocks have been found in ancient hearths, scorched and cracked in ways that suggest repeated heating and cooling. Not just for cooking, but maybe for warmth. Maybe even for rituals. Some theories say hot stones were used in steam pits or sweat lodges. Others say they were for heating sleeping areas. Either way, you've stumbled onto something older than written memory. There's even an art to choosing the right stones. You prefer granite, dense, long-lasting heat. Others go for basalt when they can find it. No one uses limestone. That stuff cracks too easily, and you're not risking an explosion under your thighs at midnight. The habit catches on so thoroughly that you start keeping a few stones just for warmth, marking them with scratches or little bits of ochre. Not decorative, just to tell them apart. You catch yourself patting them affectionately, like pets. And hey, they've earned it. These quiet lumps of earth have kept you from waking up with icicles in your nose. You remember one night in particular. A storm blew in hard and fast. The fire struggled. Wind screamed through the gaps in your snow wall. Everyone huddled together, but the real salvation came from the rocks. 3 of them, hot and wrapped tight, passed hand to hand like sacred artifacts. You placed one in the centre of the pile, and it held the warmth all night. Not perfect, but enough. Now, even as the days start to stretch longer and the sun dares to rise a little higher, you still heat your stone every night. It's become a ritual. You feed the fire, you eat, you warm your stone, you sleep. A rhythm that for once doesn't feel ruled by the chaos of winter. You hold it now as you lie beneath your hides, the warmth already sinking into your belly. It hums like a living thing, like the earth itself is rooting for you. And maybe it is. You've used its bones to survive, and tonight it's keeping you from freezing to death. You smile to yourself, eyes half-lidded, as Nook shifts beside you and lets out a long, contented sigh. Warm bodies, warm rocks, and a fire that still crackles softly a few feet away. You think, I might actually be getting good at this. The fire flickers gently across the cave walls, casting long, dancing shadows that stretch and bend like they've got a story to tell. You've seen those shapes for as long as you can remember. At first, just flickers, weird distortions in the corner of your eye, maybe a trick of tiredness. But lately, you've started to see more. A pattern, a meaning, and once you see it, you can't stop. So tonight, as the cave settles into sleep and the fire drops to a soft glowing pulse, you pick up a chunk of charcoal from the edge of the hearth. It's warm in your fingers, smooth and smudgy. You stand, stretch the stiffness from your legs, and turn to the wall that's become your favourite. It's slightly curved, smooth from years of smoke and bodies pressing close. You've had your eye on it for weeks, and now it's time. You begin to draw, not because someone told you to, not for praise or glory or legacy, just because you have to. There's something inside you that needs to get out. Maybe it's memory, maybe it's magic, maybe it's just boredom. But either way, the first lines come easy. The curve of a horn, the suggestion of a back leg, a swirl for motion. You've seen these animals 100 times in the wild, bison, deer, wolves, and now you bring them to life again in black and red. It doesn't take long for the others to notice. A soft murmur spreads through the cave. No one says much. Words feel wrong here. But you sense them gathering, watching from the edges. Some squat near the fire, poking at the coals. Others leaning close, breath held. And as you add the final lines, an aurochs mid-charge, a figure with arms raised like it's calling the snow to stop, you feel something ripple through the air, like the cave is listening. This isn't just art. It's not even just storytelling. It's warmth. Because in a world where the cold gnaws at your skin and silence can feel like a second predator, a story is a kind of fire. You build it line by line, shape by shape, until it radiates heat that doesn't burn your hands but fills your chest. You don't just survive the cold, you resist it. You define yourself against it. There's a reason the elders whisper stories as they tend the fire, a reason children fall asleep not to silence, but to myth. In these long, sunless winters, where the world turns white and grey and your breath becomes your most reliable companion, stories are the only colour you have. And now, you've added a new one to the wall. You take a step back and sit, still holding the charcoal, and watch as others come forward. One traces your drawing with a finger, another adds a simple line beneath it, a spiral, maybe a symbol for wind. A third, younger one, picks up a piece of burnt wood and starts sketching their own figure, a long-legged creature that looks like a cross between a rabbit and a fever dream. It's not accurate, but it's theirs. Quirky addition, someone starts mixing crushed berries and animal fat to make red pigment. It's messy, sticky, not particularly durable, but under firelight it glows. You use it sparingly. Lines of red along a mammoth's tusk, a splash behind a running deer, but it brings everything to life in a way charcoal alone can't. For the first time, the wall doesn't just look like a memory, it looks like motion. There's a theory some scholars toss around that cave paintings weren't just decoration. They were maps, teaching tools, maybe even rituals. You're living proof that it can be all of those at once. The act of painting burns calories, sure, but it also gives shape to ideas that can't be held in your hands. You don't have a written language, but you have symbols, repetition, meaning. One of the older tribe members tells you that the animals you draw will find you again in real life, that by putting their shapes on the wall, you're giving their spirits a way to come back. You smile at that. Not because you believe it, but because maybe you do. Later someone brings out a carved bone flute. It's crude, just a hollow tube with holes, but it sings. You hear the first notes echo through the cave, soft and warbling, and suddenly the space feels bigger, like the walls are stretching, like the ceiling's rising. The music mixes with the flickering firelight and the lines on the wall, and something new is born. Not just survival, culture. This is how it starts. Not with a declaration or a blueprint, but with a handful of soot, a curve of stone, and a moment when the fire feels like it's listening to you. You don't even notice how warm you are until hours have passed and your hands are stained. Your back aches, and the fire has died down to glowing whispers. You curl up near the wall that now holds your drawings and pull your furs tight. The cave feels different tonight. Fuller, alive. The wind outside still howls. The cold still presses against the stone. But in here, you've lit another kind of flame, and that warmth, it doesn't flicker, it stays. The snow is thigh-deep and crusted over, forcing you to stomp through it with the grace of a half-frozen bison. Your breath steams out in short, angry puffs as you trudge up a slope near camp. You're not out here for fun, you're following tracks, broad sunken impressions lined with hair marks spaced wide apart. Your heart quickens, but not in fear, in awe. You know what made these. Mammoth. Not just a mammoth either, a woolly one judging by the size and shape. The snow fills in some of the edges, but you can still make out the rounded heel, the toe splay, the deep press of weight. You crouch, gloved fingers hovering just above the print. The beast passed here maybe a day ago, alone or trailing behind its herd. Either way, it's not far. You head back to camp, the thought already brewing. If your group can bring one down, or even salvage a fallen one, you'll have more than food. You'll have everything. Because when it comes to survival, the woolly mammoth is your Ice Age Costco, a walking warehouse of warmth, tools, and calories. If you don't freeze to death chasing it, it'll keep you alive for weeks. The next morning, your hunters fan out. You're among them, wrapped in layered hides, gripping a spear tipped with finely worked stone. You're not expecting an easy win. The mammoth is massive, built for the Ice Age like a mountain on legs. But the weather is on your side. Cold, windless, perfect for following tracks and not sweating too much. You move quiet, heads low, scanning the ground for signs, dung, broken saplings, frost-matted fur snagged on bark. It takes hours, but eventually you find it. She's young, not a calf, but not a full adult either. She's separated, limping slightly, her back legs stiff. You don't cheer, you don't even speak. You feel the weight of it, what this means, what it will cost. You look into her eyes and see a kind of weariness that mirrors your own. She's surviving, just like you, but only one of you is going to walk away from this. When it's done, hours later, after the shouts, the spears, the chase, the final trembling fall, you kneel beside her massive body and press your forehead to her side. Her fur is warm, thicker than anything you've ever touched. The snow is stained red, but not gruesome. Sacred. Everyone moves in silence, reverence. You don't take life lightly, especially not this kind. Then comes the work. First you take the meat. It's obvious, necessary, heavy. You pack it onto sleds, wrap it in snow, seal it tight. But it's everything else that excites you. The real treasures are just beginning. The hide is thick. So thick it takes 3 people to hold it open while a 4th slices it clean. It's covered in a dense, insulating wool that feels almost like felted hair. You cut it carefully, making plans before your knife even moves. A full mammoth hide can be a tent, a cloak, a dozen blankets. The warmth it offers isn't just theoretical. You can feel it in your fingers as you carry the first piece away. Even in the cold air, the hide still radiates heat, like it remembers the giant it came from. Back at camp, the work never stops. The tusks are hauled in by your strongest, dragged with ropes over packed snow. There'll be tools, club handles, digging poles, carvings, maybe even trade if you meet another tribe. The bones are stacked, cleaned, dried by the fire. Ribs become shelter frames. Leg bones become storage containers, smoothed and sealed. Even the skull, massive, alien, is placed near the edge of the camp, a marker of respect, a reminder of the beast that gave you this season's survival. And then there's the fat. Mammoth fat is gold. You render it down slowly over the fire, letting it melt into thick amber-coloured oil. You store it in bladders, seal it with wax and bury some under snow to keep cool. It becomes fuel for lamps, cooking oil, body salve, even a sort of glue. You massage it into cracked skin, into leather to make it supple. One person swears it cures coughs. Another says it keeps bad spirits away. You don't know what's true, but you do know it keeps you warm from the inside out. The stomach lining becomes water containers. The sinew is stripped, dried, and braided into cords stronger than anything you could make from deer. Even the hair, long and coarse, is saved. You twist it into ropes, pad your boots with it, line your bedding. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is taken for granted. You're amazed, honestly, at how useful this creature is. It's like nature made one animal to be a complete survival kit, then wrapped it in 10 inches of fur and let it wander into the snow. And the best part, it lasts. Weeks, sometimes more. Properly dried meat and fat can keep through the worst cold snaps. The hide, once scraped and stretched, can become a whole structure. One group even lays it over a rib frame and packs snow around the base, creating a windproof hut. You climb inside once it's finished and just sit there, stunned. It's warm, actually warm, from mammoth skin and fire and stubborn human hands. Here's a weird one. Someone figures out that you can heat water inside the mammoth's stomach, fill it with snow, hang it over fire, and wait. The lining doesn't burn. You have hot water. You just invented the Ice Age kettle. Some researchers argue about whether our ancestors really used every part of these animals, or if that's just the romanticism of modern minds. But you? You are that ancestor, and you don't romanticize a thing. You use what you need because there's no other option. You work all day with numb hands and aching shoulders, and when night falls you curl up inside a mammoth hide shelter, warmed by stones, bellies full, feet dry, and you thank the animal in the only way you know how. You survive. And that night, as you sit by the fire with the others, chewing on marrow-soaked meat, someone starts singing. No words, just humming. Low, deep, slow. A rhythm like footsteps through snow. You realise it sounds like the mammoth, the heavy presence of it, the thrum of its life. Others join in, voices rising and falling. You don't know if it's mourning or gratitude or just a release of tension. Maybe it's all three. You stare into the fire, mammoth fat hissing in the flames, and feel something ancient stir in your chest. Not sadness, not pride, something harder to name. You're not just warm tonight, you're changed. You used to dread the long nights, the way the sky darkened so early and stayed black for what felt like forever. But now, as the season deepens and the days shrink to thin slivers of grey, you find yourself adjusting, not just in routine but in your bones. Something ancient stirs, a rhythm that doesn't care what time your brain thinks it is, a rhythm that belongs to winter itself. It starts slowly. You begin sleeping more, not laziness, not fatigue, but a quiet surrender. You wake up, eat, tend to fire or gear or meat drying on racks, and then, almost without meaning to, you fall asleep again. A nap that turns into a full cycle. Your body doesn't want a long stretch of wakefulness followed by one night of rest. It wants fragments. It wants to work with the dark, not against it. And so, you let it. You move into what you now think of as your nocturnal rhythm. You sleep when you're tired, eat when you're hungry, and shift into a pattern that makes almost no sense to your thinking mind, but makes perfect sense to the deeper part of you, the part moulded by millennia of cold, of darkness, of survival. You notice others doing the same. No one plans it. No one announces, "We'll now be observing the winter sleep schedule." It just happens. One by one, people start resting more during the darker stretches, waking up at odd hours, tending fires in silence, eating by moonlight, then drifting back to sleep. Conversations happen in hushed tones between naps. Meals become scattered. The sun, when it shows up, is greeted more as a visitor than a guide. You start to treat your day in pieces, a few hours for tending gear, a few for hunting if the light holds, then rest, then warmth, then quiet. What's strange is how natural it feels. Modern people might call this a form of segmented sleep, or biphasic sleep, or even winter torpor. There are old studies and old journals that mention similar rhythms in pre-industrial Europe. People waking in the night, eating small meals, talking, praying, even visiting neighbours before sleeping again until morning. But you don't need books to tell you what your body already knows. The cold demands energy conservation. You're not wasting heat by being active all the time. You're not out running laps in the snow for fun. You move slow. You sleep often. You hibernate in spirit, if not in form. There's still work, of course. Always. The fire doesn't feed itself. The hides don't scrape and soften without effort. But now that effort is broken up, spread across the strange rhythm of long nights and soft naps. You might sit by the fire at what would have once been considered the middle of the night, stirring a pot of boiled marrow, while someone beside you patches a ripped mitten. Both of you wrapped in cloaks, shoulders touching, saying nothing, and then you lie down right there on the packed fur mat and sleep again. Not worried about the hour, not worried about waking, and the dreams. The dreams are different in winter. They're longer, heavier, as if your mind knows it finally has time to stretch out. You dream of green hills, of warm winds, of animals moving in slow motion across fields that no longer exist. You dream of rivers without ice, of running, not from anything, just running for the joy of it. Sometimes you wake with tears in your eyes and have no idea why. Other times you wake laughing. Once you dream of the fire speaking to you, whispering your name. You sit bolt upright, heart hammering, and for a moment you swear the coals are glowing brighter, like they know. Quirky fact: you once tried to sleep through an entire day and night on purpose, just to see what would happen. You succeeded. Barely. But when you woke up, your joints ached, your mouth was dry, and your stomach growled like a wolf. Turns out, even in winter, your body doesn't want to stop. It just wants to slow, to shift, to adapt. And that adaptation goes deeper than sleep. Your conversations get slower, more thoughtful. Your story is longer, more meandering. You find yourself sitting in silence more often, comfortable in it, not needing to fill the space. The cold makes everything deliberate. You wrap your words like you wrap your body, in layers. Some in the tribe start using the time to teach. An elder begins reciting the lineage of your people during one of the longer midnight meals. It takes hours, interrupted by naps and side conversations, but no one minds, no one rushes. The night is long, there's nowhere to go, there's time. Others hum softly while they sew, or braid, or carve. Music without meaning, except that it feels like warmth. You even catch yourself doing it, tapping a bone needle against the stone, a rhythm that matches nothing but makes the silence less lonely. Scholars in your future will argue about whether early humans truly hibernated during winter. Some think it's possible, our distant ancestors slowing their metabolisms, sleeping through the coldest weeks like bears in a den. Others scoff. No evidence, they say, no physiological mechanism, but they've never lived like you do. Never spent months wrapped in furs, moving through darkness like a drifting log in frozen water. You don't need to hibernate in the strict sense. You just need to stop fighting winter's rhythm. You adapt, and the cold, while still brutal, feels less personal, like a season, not a sentence. Tonight you lie beside the fire, nook pressed against your hip, the glow of coals flickering across the cave walls. Someone is humming again, a low sound, wordless, like a lullaby sung for no one. You close your eyes, not because you're tired, but because the rhythm calls for it. You might sleep for a few hours. You might wake in the dark and sip broth from a warm stone bowl. You might dream again of sun and warmth and running rivers. But for now, you're still. Winter has shaped your schedule, not with rules, not with alarms, but with a deep, quiet pull. You don't fight it anymore. You follow it. The wind outside is sharpening again, thin and icy like it's been filed down to a blade. It hisses across the snow and sneaks through the seams of your shelter, testing every crack like a burglar feeling for loose doors. The kind of night where you don't move unless absolutely necessary. The kind where fire isn't optional, it's the whole strategy. And tonight, that strategy comes with a bonus. Food. Hot food. You don't even wait until your hands are warm before you start cooking. You drag a flat stone from the edge of the fire, wipe the ash from its surface with a tuft of moss, and set it back down like a prehistoric griddle. The meat's already been carved, thin strips of reindeer shoulder, and it's cold, practically rigid. But once you lay it across the hot stone, everything changes. There's a sizzle, not dramatic. Not like in those modern movies where food is always sizzling like it's auditioning for a cooking show. But here, in the quiet of your winter shelter, it's the best sound in the world. The fat bubbles and curls, the scent rises, smoky, rich, primal, and spreads through the air like a signal that things, at least for now, are okay. Everyone's noses lift slightly, even the ones pretending to nap. You glance at the others and see the same thought reflected back. Warm food equals warm bodies. It's simple math. You might wrap yourself in layers, heat stones, build windbreaks and bury yourself under hides. But nothing fights off cold from the inside like a hot meal. You start making what has become your cold weather specialty, a kind of stew if you can call it that. It's really just whatever you've got on hand. Tonight it's boiled roots, dried meat, fat scrapings, and a handful of snow melted down in a carved antler bowl. You drop in a bit of marrow for good measure, then nestle the whole thing in the coals, letting it simmer slowly as the smoke curls into your nose. The scent is heavy, meaty, earthy, a little bit burnt, and your stomach groans in response. Not politely either, loudly. Everyone hears it, and someone chuckles. You shrug. That's how you know it's working. When the stew starts to bubble, you stir it with a long stick and taste cautiously. The broth scalds your tongue, but you're not even mad about it. That heat blooms down your throat, spreads into your chest, and settles somewhere beneath your ribs. A heat that doesn't leave when the fire fades. The kind that lingers, that sticks. You pass the bowl around, careful not to spill because every drop is liquid gold. Everyone takes a sip, some with quiet nods, others with grateful grunts. One of the kids blows on it dramatically before taking a slurp and immediately hisses, holding their tongue. They learn fast. Pain is a teacher, especially in the kitchen. You think back to how this all started, when you used to eat whatever you had, however you had it. Raw meat, dried strips, frozen chunks. But cooking over fire changed everything. Not just taste, not just digestion, but morale. Warm food became a ritual, a comfort, a promise. Even on the darkest nights, if the stew is boiling, you're still here. The science of it. Modern scholars would tell you cooking releases more nutrients, reduces disease risk, and allows the body to absorb calories faster. All true. But you don't need a textbook. You feel it. When you eat hot food, your energy returns faster. Your fingers regain feeling. Your thoughts get sharper. You stop shivering. That's why every shelter has a fire, not just for heat, but for cooking. You've seen all kinds of setups. Stones piled into crude ovens, meat skewered on sticks and turned slowly by hand, even boiling in stomach-lining sacks using hot rocks dropped into the water. You tried that once. It's tricky, takes patience, but it works. The taste isn't elegant, but it's survival. You also learn to improvise. When snow runs low and wood is hard to find, you cook small. A single stone, kept hot all day, can sear thin meat strips fast enough to make a meal. Sometimes you wrap food in leaves or bark and bury it under coals. It cooks slow, but the results are tender and smoky. You remember the first time you unwrapped a package of rabbit and realised it had turned soft and rich, falling apart in your hands. You almost cried. Cooking in winter isn't about being full, it's about being warm. You add fat wherever you can, bare grease, marrow, suet scraped from bones, because that's the good stuff, the calories that stick, that fight back against the cold from the core out. You start saving the fattiest pieces for cooking, even melting extra into your broth-like seasoning. You've become a connoisseur of prehistoric comfort food. Quirky fact: one of the elders swears by a winter tea made from pine needles and snowmelt. You scoffed at first, until you tasted it. It's sour, earthy, and weirdly soothing. They say it fights scurvy. You don't know what that is, but you haven't died yet, so maybe they're right. You start ending each night with something hot in your belly. Doesn't matter what it is: stew, broth, roasted root vegetables wrapped in hide and set near the fire. It just needs to be warm. You even save bits of cooked fat in a pouch and chew on them before bed. It's not delicious, but it helps. And the best nights? Those are the feast nights. Rare, but unforgettable. After a big hunt, after a mammoth kill, after something worth celebrating. Those are the nights with sizzling meat, hot broth passed in shared bowls, laughter rising like sparks. You eat until you feel swollen with heat, until the cold outside the cave doesn't even matter, until the darkness seems farther away. Tonight isn't a feast. It's a small fire and a humble bowl, but it's hot, it's nourishing, and when you curl up under your hides, stomach full, cheeks flushed, the cold feels manageable. You're not warm exactly, but you're not freezing, and that line, thin as it is everything. You close your eyes and hear the soft sound of the fire fading, the low hum of someone humming to themselves, and the crack of fat sizzling on the last hot stone. You think of tomorrow, of food to find, wood to collect, more broth to boil, but for now, you sleep full, and that's more than enough. Smoke is still curling from last night's fire when you wake, and you take a deep breath before opening your eyes, testing the air. It's light, a bit woody, not too thick. That's good. Too much smoke means the cave didn't breathe while you slept, and you'll all wake up groggy and head-throbbing. But today, the balance held. You lift your head, fur slipping off your shoulders, and catch a glimpse of morning light slicing through the mouth of the cave. A single shaft of pale gold, not warm exactly, but honest. You made it through another night. You shuffle toward the fire pit and crouch, letting the warmth hit your knees first, then your fingers, then gradually your whole frame starts to thaw. One of the kids nearby is rubbing their eyes and blinking, their hair sticking up in frozen clumps. You toss them a hide-wrapped hot stone without saying a word. They catch it with a grateful grunt and hold it to their chest like a sacred relic. But your focus this morning is on something less glamorous. Airflow. Cave ventilation. That invisible thing keeping you warm without killing you. The fire is life, yes, but it's also a risk. You've learned that the hard way. Nights when you stoked the flames too high and woke up choking, your lungs seizing from smoke that had nowhere to go. Or worse, nights when the fire died for fear of suffocating the group, and the cold crept in like a thief. So you've become an expert in how air moves. You start the day by checking your draft points, tiny openings near the cave ceiling, gaps near the entrance, even the little smoke slit you carved with your flint tool 3 weeks ago. It's crude, but it does the trick. You slide aside the snow-packed hide that's covering it, and feel the air shift immediately. A slow suction pulls smoke up and out. The warmth dips slightly, but the air clears. Balance. You've turned your shelter into a kind of breathing machine. When you build fires, you always angle the pit so it draws, sloped stone at the back to funnel air up, an escape path for smoke, a sunken trench beneath the logs for airflow. You're not an architect, but you are a survivor, and that means learning from every mistake. This morning you decide to reinforce one of the air channels with bark and stone. You crawl up near the cave's back wall, past where the soot has blackened the ceiling, and dig a bit of snow from a crack overhead. A little breeze slips through, cool and fresh. Perfect. You line the inside with curved bark, smooth side down, and wedge it in place with flat stones. You're making a vent. A chimney, kind of. Small, controlled. Just enough to let the smoke out without letting all the warmth escape with it. It's not glamorous work. You chip a fingernail, bark dust gets in your eyes. But when you light the next fire, the difference is immediate. The smoke rises in a lazy column, drawn toward your little opening like it knows the way. No swirling clouds, no coughing fits, just fire and breath coexisting. Some in the group still don't get it. They think smoke is a matter of luck. But you know better. You've watched how wind patterns change with the snowpack, how certain days trap smoke low to the ground while others let it drift out clean. You know that a fire without ventilation is just a slow way to bury yourself in ash. Quirky moment. A few weeks back, one of the kids stuck a carved tube, a hollow bone, into the vent and started blowing through it, trying to make music. What they didn't expect was the sudden whoosh of smoke blasting through the other end and out the top. They laughed until they choked, but it gave you an idea. Forced airflow. The next day you tried waving a hide like a bellows near the fire pit. The flames jumped, the smoke cleared, and the heat intensified. Accidental innovation, courtesy of a bored child with a bone flute. You've also learned how to trap heat when needed. On windless nights you stack stones around the fire like a low dome, then drape hides over the top, leaving only a narrow opening for smoke to escape. The result? A warmer, slower burn. More heat stays near the floor, radiating outward. Less waste. Less freezing. There's debate among scholars, future scholars, the ones not yet born, about how advanced your ancestors really were when it came to managing cave air. Some claim early humans were mostly lucky, making fire where it didn't kill them and hoping for the best. Others argue that repeated hearths in deep caves, consistent soot layers, and even blackened ceiling patterns show real, intentional design. You don't care about the argument. You're too busy living it. Your evidence? You're still breathing, and breathing in winter is no small feat. You don't just need air, you need good air. Air that warms as it moves. Air that carries away moisture. You've seen caves where breath froze to the ceiling, stalactites of frost growing downward like teeth. You've watched people's lungs struggle in smoke-heavy air, faces red and eyes swollen. You've felt what it's like to wake with a chest full of soot. That's not survival. That's gambling. Now, with your new vent working and the fire pulling strong, you let yourself relax a little. You sip some pine tea, still steaming in its stone bowl. You stretch out, legs warming near the coals, and feel the air swirl gently around you. It's moving. Alive. Carrying warmth and smoke in the right directions. The system is holding. You glance at the wall where your drawings still sit. Animals in motion, hunters with arms raised, spirals of wind and fire. You consider adding a new symbol. Maybe a line rising, curling, twisting upward. A smoke trail. An offering. A lesson. Because the fire isn't just survival, it's communication. And the air that carries it. That's language too. Unspoken. Vital. You lie back, watching a thread of smoke slip up through your handmade vent, curling out toward the pale blue sky. It doesn't choke. It doesn't linger. It just leaves, carrying yesterday's breath and last night's heat, making room for something new. And you breathe easy. The snow outside is sparkling under a full moon, silent and smug in its ability to make the world feel completely still. You're awake, again, in the middle of what might be night or morning or some weird in-between time winter events just to mess with your sense of order. The fire's still burning, low but steady, and you're tucked into your fur pile with your back to the stone wall and your toes pressed against a warmed, hide-wrapped rock. All in all, it's peaceful, which is exactly why you're dreading what comes next. Because peace in winter, in the Ice Age, means someone else is thinking the same thing. This spot is too good to leave alone. You've been here for a while now, longer than usual. The little cliffside shelter you patched together with mammoth ribs and snow blocks. It's holding. The fire pit works. The smoke vent you carved hasn't caved in. The meat is drying well, the snowpack hasn't collapsed, and nobody's lost any toes lately. That's the dream, right? Warm, stable, fed. And that means, inevitably, someone else wants it too. You first catch signs of them 2 days ago. Broken branches not made by elk. A track that's wide at the ball but narrow at the heel. A human foot in soft leather, not an animal. You bring it up quietly over the fire and everyone goes still for a beat. No panic, no accusations. Just that long, slow look around the circle like, yeah, we knew this wouldn't last. Because good caves are rare. Warm caves, even rarer. And caves that don't flood, collapse, smoke out, or serve as bear dens in the off-season. Practically sacred. You didn't find this place by accident. You earned it, slogging through weeks of snow, living in snow pits, surviving on marrow and melted fat, until finally, you found a place that didn't actively try to kill you. And now someone else is sniffing around, probably telling themselves the same story. You can't even blame them. But that doesn't mean you're giving it up without a fight. You prepare, quietly, carefully. The entrance to your cave faces downhill, so you start stacking snow along the edges to build a barrier, just high enough to slow someone down, not high enough to scream defensive wall. You reinforce it with stones and branches, just in case. Then you stash your best supplies, stone tools, meat bundles, spare furs, farther back in the cave, near the dry corner under the overhang. If things go bad, you want them protected. You even dig a quick tunnel through the snow behind the wall, an escape path that only you and your group know about. It's cramped, ridiculous, and you get stuck the first time you try it. But it works. Weapons come next, spears are sharpened, clubs are checked for cracks, even the stone slings get pulled from storage. Small but deadly, especially when wielded by someone who knows how to whip a rock at full speed into someone's forehead from 10 paces. You've seen it, you've done it. Survival doesn't have room for hesitation. And yet, you're not eager for blood. There's no council for this. No tribal courts or drawn-up territory lines. But there is an understanding. If a group finds a good cave and they've clearly settled in, fire pit, drying meat, reinforced walls, you don't just stroll in and claim it. That's a declaration of war. You can trade, you can ask, but you don't take. So the question is, what kind of people are these? That night you post a watch. 2 people at the entrance, wrapped in furs, armed, quiet. The wind howls, the moon rises, nothing happens, until the next night. You hear them before you see them, footsteps crunching over hard snow, slow, cautious. Not many, maybe 3. Then a voice, low and wary. We saw the smoke. That's it. No demands, no aggression, just a statement. You respond without standing. This place is ours. Move on. There's a long pause. You feel the tension wrap around the group like a coiled rope. Then the voice again, a little closer. We've got 2 young ones, 1 injured. We'll trade. Now that changes things. You step forward just enough to see them. Shadows in the snow, weapons lowered but ready. One has a child slung across his back. The other is holding something out, meat wrapped in hide. The third is limping. The debate begins. Not out loud, but in glances. You could say no. You have every right. But you also know what it's like to be desperate, cold, tired. You remember the season your cousin broke her leg, and your group barely made it through. You remember the taste of boiled bark and melted snow. This is not an easy world, so you let them in, not all the way. Just near the fire, just for one night. You're not making friends, you're making a deal. They stay on one side of the cave, you stay on yours. No one sleeps much. But no one dies either. They keep their promise, leaving in the morning after sharing a bit of smoked elk and a bone knife you'd been eyeing since they pulled it out. The child on the man's back waves before disappearing into the snow. You don't wave back, but you watch them until they vanish. Territory is complicated. Future historians will debate how territorial early humans were. Did we share space? Did we defend it? How often did violence erupt over shelter, food, fire? You don't need debate, you live it. And the answer is, It depends. Sometimes survival means pushing others out. Sometimes it means pulling them in, briefly, cautiously, with eyes always on their hands. You return to your cave, double-check the wall, restack the meat, relight the fire. Everyone is tired, but still breathing, still warm. The cave is yours again, and now it feels even more like home. Not because you fought for it, but because you chose what kind of people you are. Because in a world that freezes skin, silences voices, and erases footprints by morning, that choice matters more than most. You lie back that night, staring at the smoke curling through your carefully maintained vent, the snow glowing faintly outside, and the fire dancing just enough to feel like hope. You think, let them come. We know how to stay. The wind is howling again, the kind of sound that turns trees into instruments and caves into echo chambers. You're tucked deep into the back of the shelter, furs up to your chin, watching the fire fight its own battle against the dark. Outside, snow is falling in a quiet fury, drifting sideways, then upward, then back down in slow, thick clumps. But inside, something far more delicate is happening. A new life is arriving, and everyone, even the fire, seems to be holding its breath. Childbirth in winter. The phrase alone feels cursed. You've seen it before. Once when the season was turning and the ground had softened, and once more in late autumn, when the frost was just flirting with the earth. But this is deep cold. The kind that turns breath to ice and makes your fingers go numb just thinking about water. And yet here you are, crouched beside a birthing mat made of layered hides, gripping a wet cloth between your palms, while one of your clan breathes like her lungs are made of bellows. The cave smells like smoke, sweat, fear, and anticipation. The kind of mix that settles into your bones and stays there. She cries out again, low and guttural. It echoes once, twice, then disappears into the stone. You don't speak. No one does. The woman next to her, the eldest midwife, just keeps murmuring, soft and rhythmic, words that mean everything and nothing. Breathe, push, breathe, push. It's a chant, a spell, the only music that matters tonight. You've prepared for this as best you could. The warmest corner of the cave insulated with moss, hides, and snow-packed walls to block drafts. Flat stones heated by the fire and wrapped in cloth are placed around the perimeter, radiating a soft, steady heat. You've boiled water. Actual hot water, using the mammoth stomach trick, and laid out clean fur to wrap the child, if and when it finally arrives. Everything is ready. As ready as it can be, anyway. But still, you worry, because the winter has no sympathy. Babies don't care what season it is, but the cold does. It waits like a predator at the edge of the firelight, licking its lips. Newborns are soft and slippery and fragile. One wrong move, one cold gust, one delay in feeding or wrapping or warming, and you've got grief instead of life. That fear makes every moment stretch. Minutes become hours. Each push feels like a gamble, like you're asking nature for just one more chance. And then just as the fire starts to dim and your own limbs are stiff from kneeling so long, it happens. A cry. Wet, sharp, full of outrage and lungs. The midwife lifts the tiny body, pale and furious, into the air. Everyone exhales. The mother collapses into the hides, spent but smiling. You're already moving, hands out, wrapping the child in fur, holding it close to the warm stone you've been guarding like treasure. You press the bundle against your chest, feeling it twitch, hiccup, breathe. Still crying, still alive, and that's a miracle. Later, when the mother is cleaned and swaddled and sipping warm broth, and the baby is finally asleep with its mouth open like a yawn frozen in time, you all sit around the fire in a stunned, silent circle. The storm outside is louder now, but inside there's nothing but quiet awe. Someone whispers, "Born in the cold." That's a strong one. You nod. Not because it's poetic, but because it's true. Quirky tradition. One of the elders ties a little tuft of mammoth fur to the baby's wrist, a charm for warmth and strength. Another carves a notch into the stone wall with a flint blade, a mark, a record, proof that despite everything, life still pushes forward. It's not the first child born in this cave. There are old marks too, a series of lines and symbols etched into a flat stretch of rock near the sleeping area. Some are faded, some deep. One even has a tiny painted handprint next to it, reddish-brown and smudged by time. Each one says the same thing: we endured. Later, when things have settled, you tuck the baby into a pouch made from hair fur, then wrap it in layers like a nesting doll. The mother holds it close, her skin pressed to its cheek. Skin to skin, that's how they survive. You don't have blankets or bottles or temperature-controlled rooms, you have each other. That's it, and it's enough. You notice the fire has grown again, someone adding wood quietly while the others watch the birth. You add a few more pieces just in case. You keep the stones hot. You triple-check the smoke vent. The entire cave becomes a machine of warmth and breath and heartbeat. Childbirth isn't rare, but surviving it in a winter like this, that's a victory. Not just for the mother, not just for the baby, but for the entire group. Every successful birth is a rebellion against extinction. Every cry is a reminder that you haven't lost yet. There's debate, of course, among future scholars. How did early humans handle childbirth in these harsh climates? Did they migrate south to give birth in milder weather? Did they have rituals or knowledge passed down through generations? Did midwives exist in structured roles, or was it all instinct? You could answer some of those questions. Yes, there are women who know how to feel a belly and know it's time, how to position the body, how to calm a screaming newborn, how to keep a fire going through an endless night. Not by accident, by memory, by teaching. And no, you don't always move south. Sometimes there's no time, sometimes you can't, so you make do. You build heat out of nothing, you turn hides into wombs, you breathe life into a world made of ice. Tonight, you stare at the baby, now twitching in its sleep, eyes fluttering. You reach out, touch its tiny wrinkled hand. It curls around your finger without thought. That's when you feel it, that heat again. The kind you can't make with fire. The kind that isn't in meat or furs or stones. A different kind, internal, communal. The kind that keeps people going. You sit a little closer to the fire, not because you're cold, because the world just got bigger and warmer. You wake to a silence so dense it feels like the air itself has frozen. No wind, no creaking trees, not even the usual distant echo of snow shifting off the cliffs above. Just a thick, cottony stillness. That kind of hush only comes after a serious dump of snow, heavy, wet, and absolute. When you sit up and crawl toward the cave's entrance, the wall of white confirms it. You're snowed in. Not partially, not lightly, fully. Snow has blown across the mouth of the cave and packed itself tight against the opening. You push your hand against it and it doesn't give. No light shines through. No air moves. It's like the cave has been plugged by a glacier-sized cork. You stare for a second, then do the only reasonable thing. Mutter something vaguely panicked under your breath and grab a bone tool. The first concern isn't escape, it's oxygen. You shout over your shoulder, voice echoing oddly in the sealed cave. The others stir, confused then alert. No one panics, not yet, but there's a fast scramble for tools and fire pokers, anything pointed and sturdy. Everyone knows what a cave full of smoke and no airflow feels like. You've had close calls before, you're not eager for another. You start digging, not straight out but up, at an angle. You know better than to tunnel like a badger. Snow shifts, collapses, suffocates. But this snow feels heavy and wet, not the kind that sifts like sugar and seals behind you. It holds its shape. You take turns, switching off every few minutes, lungs burning, hands numb. Heat isn't the problem right now, air is. Finally, a fistful of snow crumbles in just the right way. A breeze rushes through the hole. You can't see daylight yet, but you can feel it. That sharp, biting breath of the outside world, clear and cutting. Someone shouts behind you, relief, not alarm. A few minutes later, the tunnel breaks open, and a shaft of silver-blue light spills into the cave like water from a cracked jug. You don't cheer, not out loud, but you breathe deep and long, the way you do when you've been underwater too long and finally surface. Snowed in. It's not the first time, and it won't be the last, but it always leaves you rattled, trapped underground, with nothing but stone, fire, and the sound of your own heart. It makes you wonder what it would take to never be found again. The next few hours are about maintenance, reinforcing the new air hole, scooping snow away from the mouth of the cave to let light in. Someone wedges a carved rib-bone ladder into the tunnel to make it easier to move in and out. The cold still slips in, but it's manageable, and now, at least, you're not sealed in your own grave. You've dealt with snow before, but this storm was different. The snow is heavier than usual, bordering on slush, like the sky couldn't decide if it wanted to freeze you or drown you and just flipped a coin. It likely started with warm air colliding with the frigid ground, dumping wet snow in violent sheets. You step outside briefly and see the trees bent under the weight, the branches bowed low, heavy with white. Some of them have snapped, others lean dangerously close to collapse. You return to the cave with the worst news. The drying rack didn't survive. A crash, likely in the middle of the night, sent the wooden structure down in a heap of splintered branches and half-frozen meat. Most of it is salvageable, but soaked. The hides are clumped and heavy. The fat stores, sealed in pouches, are still intact. But the precious strips of meat, you'll need to re-dry everything, and fast. Mold doesn't wait politely. It becomes a full-day effort. You rig a new drying line inside the cave, over the fire where the air is warmest but not smoky. People take turns rotating meat, flipping hides, shifting things just enough to prevent scorching. It's awkward. Your cave smells like a stew pot and a butcher's tent at the same time. Quirky solution. Someone remembers the rocks. You start heating flat stones again, but this time you stack them under an open hide frame, turning it into a mini drying platform. The warmth radiates upward, gently drying the meat without needing direct fire. You place the wettest pieces over the rocks, rotate them like you're baking flatbread, and wait. It's slow, but steady. By nightfall, you've saved most of the meat. Some's a little crispy, a few bits lost to rot, but overall, a win. You eat a little of the chewy stuff, share it around, then focus on the fire. Because now everything depends on fire. The snow has sealed the warmth inside, sure, but it's also made the outside world practically unreachable. No hunting, no foraging, no exploring. You're cocooned in ice, and the only thing between you and frostbite is the dancing light in the centre of your cave. Future scholars will debate whether early humans intentionally designed winter caves to self-insulate like this. Snow-packed entrances, thick walls, narrow openings to trap heat. But you don't care about the theory. You care that it works, that the fire, once lit, stays lit, that your breath no longer fogs as fast, that your skin stays pink instead of blue. Still, the cave's not perfect. Moisture creeps in, condensation from the fire dripping from the ceiling like cold sweat. You dig small trenches along the edge of the floor to catch the meltwater and funnel it out. You set stones down in key spots to keep bedding dry. It's not luxury, it's just enough. At night, you lie under your furs, feeling the snowpack pressing against the outside walls, muting the world. You can hear your heart beating, steady and slow, in the silence. A few feet away, Nook is curled tightly, nose buried in her tail. One of the babies coos softly in sleep. Someone's snoring gently. And outside, the snow keeps falling. It's the kind of storm that buries everything. The kind that makes you forget what grass smells like, what the river sounds like when it runs free. The kind that could turn your cave into a tomb if you weren't so stubborn. But you are, and the fire still burns. Morning comes slowly now. Not in light. There's almost none of that. But in the subtle cues you've trained yourself to notice. The way the smoke thins just a bit as the outside air shifts. The way your body, even wrapped in layers of hide and warmed stone, somehow knows it's time to stir. And the way the child in the far corner starts kicking her feet under the furs like she's dreaming about running. All signs, all soft nudges from a world still buried in snow. You open your eyes to a dim grey glow seeping through the ice-packed entrance. A small miracle. Not light exactly. More like the memory of light. But it means one thing. The snowstorm has finally stopped. After days of waiting, shivering, digging, repairing, and quietly panicking, behind the brave faces you all wear like masks, the sky has decided to calm down. It's not warm, let's not get carried away, but the air no longer feels like a punishment. You crawl to the tunnel you dug days ago and peek out. What you see nearly knocks the breath out of you. It's still. Snow blankets everything in thick silence. The trees wear coats of white so heavy their branches look sculpted. The ground is smooth, undisturbed, like the whole world took a deep breath and froze in the middle of it. And the sky, overcast, yes, but not dark, not angry, just pale, heavy, quiet. You turn back and announce the news. It's time. Time to check the traps. Time to see if the river, however frozen, might still be hiding something worth catching. Time to move again. Because you've been still too long, and stillness is a slow death when the food runs out. No one rushes. You all move like thawing beasts, rising slowly, shaking off the stiffness of cave-bound days. There's a sense of caution, even hesitation. Being snowed in made the cave feel safe, despite the claustrophobia. Stepping outside means confronting the cold again, the risks, the hunger. But you're ready. You layer up, fur on fur, woolly hide over scraped leather. You wrap your feet in dried moss and snow-softened hide boots. Hands go into mittens stuffed with downy feathers and hair. Faces, covered in bark fibre masks or fur flaps, only the eyes exposed to the biting wind. You look like creatures, not people. Beasts shaped by weather and necessity. You're first out. The snow is knee-deep and every step is an effort. But it feels good to move again. You make your way toward the nearest snare line, trudging through a white that reflects more light than the sky ever gives off directly. You almost miss the trap entirely, buried in snow, but you spot the twitch of a stick. When you brush away the powder, you find it. A hare. Frozen solid. Caught cleanly. Not much meat, but enough for a stew. Enough to count. Others find more. 2 birds, likely confused by the storm and too slow to escape the sudden drop in temperature. A fox, half buried, dead before it could chew through the cord, and one wild surprise. A fallen tree branch with 3 clusters of winter fungus, still intact and edible, hidden under the snow and thriving in the rot. You slice them off carefully and pack them away. You've learned not to ignore the small things. Not in a season like this. When you return, breath puffing like smoke from your nose, you're greeted with nods and quiet satisfaction. Not celebration, but something close. You've entered a new phase of winter now. Not the beginning panic. Not the mid-season exhaustion. This is the deep cold, the long stretch where time blurs and food becomes as much about luck as planning. It's the part of the year where survival isn't dramatic, it's slow, it's grinding. It's the difference between eating and not eating every day. And the only way through is together. You start managing rations more aggressively, counting dried meat slices, weighing fat chunks before tossing them into stew. Every bit matters, every mistake has weight. You reallocate the sleeping arrangement, putting the smallest children and the oldest elders in the very centre of the pile each night. Not because they're weak, but because they're worth keeping warm. There's no complaining, just quiet adjustments, a shifting of bones, habits, priorities, and you begin to notice how efficient you've become, how each motion, each choice, serves the purpose of staying alive. You cook in smaller portions now, keeping pots covered tightly to trap every ounce of steam. You chew slower, savouring the taste even when there isn't much taste to begin with. You collect snow in bundles and melt it in warm stones rather than boiling it, saving fuel. Someone even crafts a small cup out of antler, insulated with moss. It holds heat just long enough to sip something warm without burning through precious resources. Quirky innovation. One of the kids, bored out of their mind after days in the cave, starts braiding dry grass and sinew into tight bundles, then stuffing them into hollow bones and lighting the ends. It turns out to be a decent slow-burn fire starter. Not flashy, but consistent. You laugh at first, then you steal the idea, and through it all, the cold stays. It doesn't punish you so much anymore, it's just there. A presence, a background hum, something to plan around, not rage against. There's a rhythm now. Wake, fire, move, hunt, mend, sleep, repeat. Some future anthropologist will wonder how people like you stayed sane through long winters with no sun, no real change in scenery, nothing but repetition. They'll theorize about vitamin deficiencies, seasonal depression, cognitive stagnation. And sure, you've had your share of low days, where the fire's not enough, and your mind drifts into dark corners. But you also find moments, small sparks, someone telling a new story, even if it's clearly made up, someone laughing over a joke about mammoth dung and slipping in the snow. A carved bird hung near the sleeping area, painted red with crushed berry and spit. Hope disguised as decoration. Because in the deep cold, hope is heat. You hold on to it. You pass it around in bowls of broth, in carved flutes, in the warmth of bodies pressed together in the dark. You feed it like a fire, carefully, daily, on purpose. And tonight, as you sit by the coals, steam rising from your mushroom and hare stew, you glance toward the mouth of the cave. Snow still leans against the entrance, high and defiant. But beyond that, a sliver of sky. Clouds still thick, but lighter. You don't smile, not yet. That would be too much, but you breathe deep, and the air, for the first time in days, smells like something other than smoke and fear. It smells like movement. Like maybe, just maybe, winter's grip is starting to loosen. Something changes overnight. You can't quite name it, but when you stir from sleep before even opening your eyes, your skin tells you first, less bite. The cold is still there, yes, but it isn't gnawing anymore, it's just hovering, like a predator that's eaten its fill. When you finally sit up, eyes squinting in the dim light, you realise what's different. The silence has cracked. There's dripping. Tiny, inconsistent, but unmistakable. Somewhere near the back of the cave, a slow, rhythmic tap, tap, tap. You scramble to your feet and stumble over a sleeping dog and a half-finished fur wrap to follow the sound. There it is, a droplet sliding off a stalactite, splashing into a shallow puddle that hadn't been there yesterday. Water. You don't say anything for a moment. You just watch the next drop form, fatten, tremble, and fall. You could cry, but you won't. Not yet. The cold might be loosening its grip, but your guard isn't coming down just because a ceiling's leaking. Still, something is happening. You step outside, through the tunnel that's more ramp now, worn down by feet and bodies and dragged wood. The light hits your eyes like a slap. Not just a glow, actual light. Weak, diffused through cloud cover, but daylight, real daylight. The sky isn't the flat slate grey you've come to expect. It's got depth again, hints of blue behind the clouds, and the snow, it's settling, sinking, losing its crisp edges and starting to sag, like it's remembering what it feels like to melt, a late winter thaw. It's dangerous. That's the first thing you think. Melting snow in patches means mud, runoff, ice collapsing underfoot. Traps that once held firm might twist or snap. Rivers that were once safe to cross now gurgle beneath weakening crust. You step carefully, but even so, even with the risk, your chest fills with something you haven't felt in weeks. Relief. You can move again. You can travel farther. Look for game. Scout for better shelter in case this thaw is more than just a tease. You signal to the others. 2 hunters gear up in minutes, quiet but energized. The dogs feel it too. Ears perked, tails high, noses in the air, sniffing something that isn't just snow and wind. The ice is turning back into scent. You set off with the others, keeping close together at first, following familiar routes. The snow still clings to the world in stubborn mounds, but between them, a new layer of wet earth is peeking through. Brown, soggy, beautiful. You crouch to press your fingers into it. The ground still cold, but no longer frozen solid. Life, buried deep, is beginning to stir. You find new tracks, fresh, deer, maybe a small herd. Their hooves left clean impressions in the soft snow, deeper in some places where they slipped. They're returning to old grazing spots. That's a good sign. Where they go, food follows. You set a snare and mark it with a branch bent into a loop, then move on. Not far from there, you come across a patch of bark stripped clean. Elk, gnawing at the trees for nutrients. You don't see them, but you smell them. Musty, wild, alive. You leave another trap, then pause by a frozen stream and listen. There's a crack like distant thunder, then a low, slow rumble beneath your feet. The ice is breaking. You don't panic. You step back, let it happen. Watch as a thin, silvery vein of water cuts across the surface and spreads, pooling in a shallow dip. A few minutes later, the melt picks up speed. Water is moving again. Not enough to drink from. Not yet. But it's flowing. And that means everything. Movement is life. Back at the cave, people are already reacting. Furs are being aired out in the thin sunbeam by the entrance. Boots are being checked for wear. Someone even suggests a mid-season move. Not far, but a shift to the ridge camp where the sun hits earlier and animals pass more frequently. It's a bold thought. Unthinkable a week ago. And suddenly conversations start to sound like planning, not just survival. Should we try fishing again? If the snow pulls back from the trees, we could try for bark strips. There's a spot where the sage grows early. If it's clear... Everyone's voice is still quiet, cautious, like speaking too loudly might jinx it. But there's movement now. Minds spinning. The cold is still here, but your bodies are remembering how to live again, not just endure. Later, while repairing a broken sled frame, you notice the birds. 3 of them perched high on a tree near the edge of the ridge. Not crows, not scavengers. These are singers. Fluffed up, small, almost ridiculous in how fragile they look. But they're alive. You hear one chirp, short, uncertain, like it's not sure if the song is allowed yet. Another responds. The sound is faint, but it cuts through the cold like a spark. You don't smile much anymore, not out here. But your mouth twitches, just a little. That night, as the fire crackles and a new stew simmers with a few fresh mushroom caps added for flavour, you watch the steam curl upward and catch yourself feeling hopeful. Dangerous emotion, but impossible to resist. The baby is sleeping deeper now, no longer curled tight against the mother's chest. The air inside the cave feels less sharp. The smoke rises smoothly. Even Nook is sleeping belly up, legs twitching in a dream. You wonder if she's dreaming of running, not in snow but through grass. You know better than to declare winter over. It always comes back for one last bite. A false spring can be worse than no spring at all. But tonight, you indulge the thought. You even pull out the half-carved figure you'd started months ago and left buried in a pouch. A small bison, still rough. You sit by the fire, warming the stone blade between your hands, and begin working again. Slowly, carefully, giving it legs, giving it shape, giving it meaning. Some future expert will say your people only made carvings in times of abundance, when survival didn't demand every moment. Let them say it. They weren't here when you sat by the fire, carving hope out of bone in the middle of a thaw. You finish one leg, smooth the base, and set it on the stone shelf near the fire. The firelight flickers over it. You nod once. Still winter, but almost. The thaw deepens the next day, and now it's undeniable. Something's ending. Not in a loud, celebratory way. Not with flowers and sunshine and warm breezes. Number. This is the slow farewell of a guest who overstayed their welcome but still refuses to fully leave. The snow is still on the ground, but it's pocked and grey, full of soft dents and water-heavy crusts. It no longer reflects light the same way. It absorbs it, collapsing under its own weight, melting at the edges. You step outside early before anyone else stirs, and for a moment you just stand there, still as a statue, breathing in the newness of the air. It tastes different now, less metallic, more alive. The wind's still cold, but it carries smell again. Earth, bark, wet moss, even animal musk. For weeks, maybe months, your nose has known nothing but wood smoke and human bodies wrapped in hides, and now the world is trying to remind you it's still here, waiting. Back inside, the cave is buzzing, not loudly, but in 1,000 tiny practical ways. People rewrapping bundles, patching the seams of travelling cloaks, melting water to soften hardened sinew thread. You hear conversations again, actual ones, not grunts or short commands, but questions, dreams. A new story about a bird who stole spring from a glacier. That kind of tale only gets told when people believe they'll live long enough to hear the ending. Today you do something you've been quietly planning for days. You take down part of the cave's wind wall. It's the first act of faith you've made in weeks. You pull the top layer of snow blocks aside, careful not to let them collapse and soak the interior. You leave a few base stones, just in case winter decides to throw a tantrum and come back for one more round. But for now, you want air, light. You're inviting spring to find you. And then, because you're nothing if not dramatic, you drag the mammoth skull out of its place at the back of the cave and set it just outside the entrance. It's not about showing off. It's about memory, about claiming space. This skull has been with you all season, since the kill, since the work of hauling it, drying the hide, melting the fat, and surviving because of it. It's more than a trophy. It's a monument, a reminder to anyone who sees it that you stayed warm, you stayed alive. The fire still burns inside, but smaller now, measured. You don't need to feed it like a starving beast anymore, just enough to cook, to take the edge off the air. You've become masters of efficiency, of not wasting heat. You think back to the first fire you made in the cave, huge, uncontrolled, smoky. You coughed for days, and now you build heat like a sculptor builds form, controlled, clean, learned. There's a rhythm to these last winter days, one you didn't expect, not quite frantic, not quite lazy, just forward. You find yourself sitting with the older ones more often, not for warmth, but for stories. The midwife with the cracked teeth tells you about a storm that buried her first cave until she had to dig out with a rib bone. Another man, nearly blind but still sharp, recites the names of places from a migration long before your time, before even his time. Places with names like Water That Sang and Valley of Hot Breath. You don't know where they are, but you know they matter. In between tasks, someone begins painting again. Not with colour, berry juice and charcoal are too precious still, but with gesture. Fingers on stone, tracing shapes, animals, spirals. You recognise the lines. Warmth, movement, a kind of unwritten language. One figure stands out, a curled shape with a flame at its centre. You ask what it means. The artist shrugs. Home? You sit with that for a while, because this place is home now. Not just the cave, but the routine, the survival, the people, the layers of memory stitched into each fur, into every soot-smudged stone. You arrived here desperate. You built warmth with your own hands. You figured out how to stay. And now? Now you have to decide what parts of this winter to carry forward. The scholarly debates will go on forever, long after you're gone. How early humans transitioned from cold seasons to warmth, how their behaviours shifted, how they celebrated survival. Did they perform rituals? Did they mark the changing season with symbolic offerings? Did they dance, or chant, or simply move on? You don't know about them, but you do something today without really thinking about it. You take one of the fire-warmed stones, flat, smooth, familiar, and you scratch a line into the wall near the sleeping alcove. Then another, and another. 30 in total, one for each day you remember fighting the worst of the cold. And beside it you etch a tiny flame, just a single curved mark with a flick above it. Not for anyone else, just for you. Just to say, I stayed warm. As the sun finally pushes through a thinning patch of cloud, the cave floods with soft light for the first time in ages. You squint into it, hand raised, adjusting like some cave lizard pulled from its den. You hear dripping water again, louder now. You step outside and see small rivulets carving channels through the snowbanks, revealing brown earth beneath. One of the children is barefoot just for a second, just to feel it. Everyone gasps, someone shouts, the child shrieks with delight, then stumbles back inside, giggling like they've done something criminal. Maybe they have. Maybe spring is the crime after all, daring to believe that cold isn't forever. You eat the last of the stored smoked meat that night. No ceremony, no speeches, just a meal. But in your mind, it feels like a send-off. The fire crackles low. The snow glows silver under a sky now dotted with stars instead of clouds. Tomorrow you'll start packing. You'll decide what to carry, what to leave behind, what to burn, bury or barter. But tonight you rest easy, warm, alive, and no longer afraid of the cold. So here you are, at the quiet edge of winter, staring into the coals of a fire that's smaller than the one you started with. But no less important. You've made it through the worst of it. You outlasted ice storms, predators, hunger, and the kind of cold that chews on your bones even through layers of fur. You didn't just survive, you adapted. You figured out the rhythm of winter and moved to its beat like you were born for it. Because you were. You remember every trick now like it's stitched into your DNA. The way the fire needs to breathe just right. Not too fast or it'll burn out. Not too slow or it'll smother. How heat rises but can be coaxed to linger low if you pack the walls just right. How fat is more than food, it's fuel. How the body becomes its own heater when wrapped in hides and nestled against others. That all warmth is borrowed, but if you're careful, if you respect it, it'll stay a little longer. You think of the baby born mid-blizzard, the rabbit you pulled from the snow snare with trembling hands, the shared bowl of marrow soup passed around the fire. You think of the skull you set outside the cave, your quiet message to the world. We were here, we endured. What's funny is, now that the snow's melting and the air is softening, there's almost a strange sadness in letting it go. The cold gave you purpose. It stripped you down to only what mattered. Warmth, food, fire, family, survival. Now that the danger is fading, things will get complicated again. Choices will get wider, priorities will stretch. But you'll carry winter with you. Not the frost or the wind, but the wisdom. You know how to make a home out of nothing, how to turn flame and fur into comfort, how to find joy in silence. That's not something the Thor can take. You're already thinking about next year. You'll do it smarter. You'll pre-cut the smoke vent, store more fat, sew tighter seams, but you'll also bring stories. The child with bare feet, the flame mark on the wall, the song of the wind in the bone flute. Winter didn't just try to kill you, it taught you. So tonight, as the last coals glow low and the stars stretch themselves into constellations again, you stretch too, under your furs, into the warmth you built, into the space between survival and living. And maybe you let yourself believe, just for a moment, that the world has turned a little more gently in your favour. Not because it's warmer outside, but because you are,